Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and welcome to the latest episode of the Hard Compound Live. If it's your first time tuning in, you are very welcome. I'm Rich and I run the Hard Compound. We're a one-stop shop for all things motorsport, and we can be found on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram. We put out generally 3 posts a day, UK time, in the middle of the morning, lunchtime, and in the evening about a variety of motorsport subjects, from F1 to touring cars, IndyCar, to NASCAR, bikes, rallying, and everything else in between. And they take the form of race reviews, race previews, any like breaking news from across the motorsport world. We do, excuse me, we do like throwbacks and on this day and birthdays and all that kind of thing. Just loads of good motorsport stuff for you. So do give us a follow on all those platforms to make sure you don't miss out and come and join the fun. We also do live video interviews, such as this one, as you might have noticed. These are streamed on our YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter only, and they're automatically recorded for your viewing pleasure. Afterwards, if you can't make these live broadcasts, they're in the live section on our YouTube and in the video section on our Facebook. We've had well over 100 guests, which we're very, very fortunate to have had from across the motorsport spectrum. I'm not going to name them all. You'll be glad to know, mainly because I can't. We've had the honour and the privilege of speaking to Mr. Mario Andretti, to Mr. Jackie X, to John Watson, to Hans Stuck, to like Brian Redman, and some legends, as you can hear. We've spoken with some drivers from the world of Formula One and sports cars, the likes of Mr. Derek Warwick. We've had like David Brabham, Stefan Johansson, excuse me, Eddie Cheever, Mark Blundell, Emanuele Perez, Mika Salo, Carl Wendlinger, Alex Caffey, Martin Donnelly, Karen Chandhok. We've spoken with IndyCar drivers, past and present, the likes of Mr. Alex Palou. We've spoken with Mr. Will Power, Scott Pruitt, Brian Herter, Linson James, Alonso Jr., Danny Sullivan, Willie Ribbs, etc., etc. So do go and check them out, but don't do it just yet, because we have another fantastic guest tonight. One of, he's probably best known for the British Touring Car Championship. We've also spoken to the likes of Steve Soper, Frank Sittler, Graham Good, Carl Jones, Jason Plato, Ivan Muller, Tarquini, Rydell, Prio, many, many others. But he's also done a lot more than that in single-seaters, both pre and post his touring car career, notably with classic Team Lotus, which we're going to come to. So I'm going to stop rambling. I've been doing so for a couple of minutes. And without any further ado, we're going to bring in our guest this evening, multi-talented racer, as I've just alluded to, and an all-round lovely chap. So we're going to bring him in right now. Please join me in extending a very warm welcome to Mr. Sean Walker.
Good evening. Hi.
Good evening, Sean. How are you, sir?
I'm all right. As you can see, I'm currently residing in the Hall of Mirrors at Versailles at the moment.
Oh, beautiful.
I know. I should really have some photographs of racing cars and all that sort of thing, but I've been resigned to the dining room for this evening. So this is it.
Well, I don't think a dining room's ever a bad place to be, is it? Yeah, it's generally comfortable, and there's sometimes food there. So happy
Not
days.
tonight, but I do have a glass of wine.
Well, that will absolutely do. Yes, a lovely way to spend a Wednesday evening, you know, with wine and motorsport. So fantastic. Yeah. Firstly, how's everything going at your end? Obviously, you had a bit of a health issue recently, but you're on mend.
Yeah, I had a craniotomy, and for those that don't know, it's where they drill into your skull. And in this case, with me, they were trying to remove an abscess. So it's not the sort of thing you do for fun. And I ended up in hospital for 5 weeks and on IV antibiotics for 3 months. And hopefully it's all okay. In fact, I'm having another scan on Friday just to make sure that it is all completely gone. But apart from that, I'm in the pink. Yes.
Excellent. Well, that's good to hear. And obviously, we hope the scan goes well on Friday.
Thank you.
As you say, it's not something you want to do as a hobby. So
not really. No, I'm trying to give it up. Actually, yeah. I tried it once. Didn't like it.
Right. Yeah. Hopefully Friday will be the last exposure to it.
Yeah.
No. Well, obviously, very, very glad that you're on the mend, and thank you very much for coming on and having a chat.
My pleasure.
This evening. You've done a lot, so we're going to have to get cracking pretty pretty quickly. Just before we do that, I want to turn my attention to the comment section. Hello to the folks who are tuning in already. Lovely to see you. Do keep the comments coming in. I can see a few. Good evening, Oliver Taylor, to Roger Algar, Darren Morley, Diff Van Evans, and many others. Any questions or comments, pop them in there and we will work them in as we go.
We'll do our best.
Yes, we're going to try and find a gap to squeeze it all in because we've got some great stuff to cover. Stuff that I will hold my hands up. I didn't know until I really sort of dove into this, and we had a chat earlier this week. So I'm looking forward to this. But a good place to start has to be at the start, I guess.
Where the best stories begin. Yeah.
Yes. We often ask how people got into motorsport. Some people came from a normal background of no motorsport, and people like Rick Parfitt got into racing lawnmowers with the members of Queen, which of course we've all done. If you just enlighten everyone to how you began in motorsport.
Motorsport background really. My father, Ian Walker, was heavily involved in racing, and rallying before that. So in the 50s and 60s, he was a Ford Works rally driver, did the Monte Carlo rally 6 times, I think. The RAC rally, absolutely no idea, but a lot. But during that time in the early 60s or late 50s, it became obvious that they were starting to introduce more sort of tarmac stages to rallying. And being a bit switched on, he thought, I know, I'll go and do a bit of circuit racing because that will make me much better at the tarmac sections. And he did that and realized he quite liked it. Started racing himself in that, but then got to the point where I think he realized he was good, but not good enough to actually get to where he wanted to be. So he started a team, Ian Walker Racing, which was very, very successful. Had a big association with Colin Chapman of Lotus, going back to one of their early cars, the Elite, and then the Elan and the Formula Juniors, which for people that don't know were the forerunners of Formula 3. And because of the association, was able to sort of tap into the driving talent that Lotus had. So the likes of Jimmy Clark, Graham Hill, Mike Spence, Peter Arundel, those sort of were the sort of drivers that they had on board his cars. They raced all over Europe, and he was very good. I mean, he was known as Walker the Talker from Colin Chapman because he was able to, he's one of the first people to really start to get money coming in. In those days, you could get start money, you could get money from the oil companies. In fact, one year he had money from a petrol company and money from an oil company, which takes some doing.
Wow.
But he was able to do it. So, but that all came to a bit of a not very pleasant end because, as you know, in those days, there was an awful lot of tragedies. And everyone thinks about it as just being Formula One tragedies. But in fact, there were people being killed left, right, and centre in Formula Juniors and sports cars and GT cars. And my father's team, unfortunately, got tied up in that as well, as did everyone else. And he lost an American driver called Pete Ryan at Reims or Ras, however you want to pronounce it. He ended up running a Works Alfa Romeo team in sort of European GT racing, the TZ1. And a guy called Tony Hayborn was killed in that at Spa. I think there was somebody else as well, but I can't remember. And he just got to the point where he'd had enough of it. But anyway, so my introduction to motorsport was through. I've got a great photograph to show you, actually.
Oh yes, we like a photo.
Right. So can you make that out? There might be a bit of reflection on it.
Yeah, we got it.
So that's Jimmy Clark in a Lotus 30, which my father ran for Lotus, and that young lad there shaking his hand is me.
Wow.
And the guy behind, looking very cool with the dark hair and the sunglasses, is my old man.
Wow.
So I didn't really have much of an option, really. So
you were kind of surrounded by it, basically.
Yeah, surrounded by it, yeah. And so from the age of 9, I was put in a cart, or go-karts as they were called then, and ended up doing quite well at that and winning the British Junior Championship in 1973. In fact, the same weekend that Terry Fullerton, who you had on a while ago, won his senior championship. I don't know if that was Terry's first senior championship or not, but anyway, he won the senior championship that day. I won the junior championship, and that was all very, very good. And we went off to do the world championship that year, and I should have done better, really, because I qualified fastest. That was all very good. Won 2 heats, came third in the other. Unfortunately, there was a certain little Frenchman there who won all 3 of his heats and was on pole for the final, and I was on the outside. And I got done in by a couple of Germans. Nothing new there, I suppose. And finished 4th. And the little Frenchman had a rather successful career because his name was Alain Prost.
I think I've heard of him.
Yeah. Unfortunately, yeah. So anyway, and I don't even think he should have been racing that weekend because
Scandal.
juniors were for under 16. He was 18. Ooh.
Wow.
There we are. Just thought I'd throw that hand grenade in.
Wow. An entire career based on the wrong age.
There we are. Anyway, so
it would never have happened. It would.
No. So anyway,
Sure
my father got me into karting, and I was very lucky actually because my father was always incredibly supportive of racing, and he loved it, and he was a great character, great sort of bon vivant and a good raconteur and all that sort of thing. And be it financially in the early days or just from a point of view of supporting, he was always very much around me and whatever I was racing, and incredibly supportive. And it was a massive help. I must tell you a funny story about the two of us, actually. Yeah. We were both members of the BRDC, and they always used to have, before the 1,000-kilometre race, they always used to have a members' dinner. It was a bit of a piss up, really, to call it a dinner was kind, really. You certainly didn't go there for the food, let's put it that way. And we were determined to be there. Our business was based in Leighton Buzzard, which is only about half an hour away from the circuit. So we were just determined to get there, be the first there, because it was a champagne reception. Of course, it's all free. And we were the last to leave, right? And to our embarrassment, when we came out of the clubhouse, and it was the old clubhouse, not the 3-story thing it is now, it was very embarrassing because we couldn't find our car, which was even more embarrassing because it was the only one left in the car park. That gives you some indication as to just how over lubricated we were. But that was kind of typical in those days, really. There was always a lot of I shouldn't really be saying this, but there was always a lot of drinking going on after racing in those days, and it was all good fun. And actually, in fact, there was a bit of a legacy from his days in rallying. But they were always known in the Ford Works team. They were always big anti the BMC team and anyone else, frankly. And the shenanigans they got up to after the events. I mean, hotels regularly just got completely trashed, but the hoteliers loved them because they would always in the morning get everyone together, everyone would chip in and pay for all the damage. So the hoteliers loved them because every time they came round, they got a refurb, right? It can't be bad, can it?
A full refurb every 6 weeks.
A full refurb of the rooms that they're trashed and the biggest bar bill, in mankind. So it was
happy days.
Stuff. Yeah.
Happy days all round.
It was happy days all round, yeah.
Wonderful.
So that's how I first got started in karting, following on from what my father had done. Yeah,
that's lovely. Okay, and like so many others, starting in the karts, but it's good to have the background that you had in the motorsport already. Just want to quickly hop into the comments. We've got a couple of questions about the BTCC and things. We're going to come to that very shortly. I believe Mr. Kevin Walker is in. I believe that is your brother.
Yeah, that is my brother, actually. Yeah.
Hello, Kevin.
Hello, Kev.
Thank you for tuning in. Hello, Kev.
And a certain Mr. Marnie's on.
Jerry Marnie. Yes. Good evening, Jerry. We love Jerry.
Yeah, I've got a story to tell you about. I'm jumping ahead a bit, but
Oh no, we can jump ahead.
We can jump
just
forward
to make sure.
Backwards.
Just to make sure Jerry is.
1989, British Grand Prix, Silverstone. Touring cars were supporting it, and it was a hot day. And after qualifying, everyone had their motorhomes or caravans or whatever it was. And there was quite a bit of beer flowing. And I can tell you that I reckon about 50% of the grid on Sunday for the touring car race at Silverstone, I don't know if Jerry remembers this, would not have passed the breathalyzer test. I can remember going into Lawrence Bristow's motorhome, and I'd been in someone else's motorhome. And there was Lawrence, there was Jerry, and there was Tim Harvey. And I don't know what they'd been drinking before, but they were just about to open their second bottle of port. Right, so very stylish, a bit old school, but very stylish. And I joined them for a bit, and I left a little bit later. I don't know what time they finished, but it was just it shouldn't happen, but it did. But it was great fun.
Wonderful, lovely,
Yeah.
lovely. Just while we're on the subject of drinking and things like that, obviously we don't do it these days.
No,
Absolutely not.
actually,
But
I'm not condoning it.
for those of you who might have tuned in a couple of weeks ago, we had Paul Radisich on, who is lovely, an absolute gentleman.
Yes.
And Sean told me a lovely story. Well, no, it wasn't a lovely story. It was a story
Story. No,
about Paul's stag do. And as I mentioned on
yes.
that particular chat, the word projectile came up.
Yeah,
and the word clogged.
well, Alan Gower organised Paul because Alan used to manage Paul Radisich,
He
and
did, yes.
Alan and I'd become very friendly with Alan because when he first came over to the UK from Australia, he worked for Andy Rouse, and in 1990 I was driving a Sierra as Andy's teammate, and anyway, he organised Paul's stag do, and Paul doesn't drink, or if he does, he might have just one or something like that, and Alan was determined to get him pissed. I don't know why, but he thought it would be hilarious. And to be fair, it was. But I don't think I've seen someone vomit with such style and with such volume as Paul did that day, to the point where toilets, both upstairs and down, were no longer operable. It was serious. I'm sure Jerry will remember that, but it was quite an evening. Yeah.
Oh,
Anyway, it's my fault. We have jumped completely out of context here.
No, it's fine. I think Jerry will remember it a lot more than Paul. But just very quick before we go on, Jerry did say this. Hello, Johnny. Obviously called you Johnny Walker.
Can I just respond to a comment that someone's made? Diffin Wynne Evans. He said that would never happen now, as all the BTCC drivers get breathalyzed. I got breathalyzed in the paddock at Thruxton in 1992. I was strapped in my car. They just started waving all the cars out, and someone came up to me and said, "Can you please breathe into this?" as we were about to start qualifying. And that was 1992. And at the time, they didn't really do it.
Wow.
Yeah. So, anyway, so Mr. Evans is absolutely right, but it's actually been going on a bit longer. Yeah.
Wow. It could be you guys that started it, maybe.
I think we might have had a hand in it. Yeah.
Yes. But Jerry said, it's great to see you again, Sean. We had great fun in the BTCC in the RS500 era, which we're going to come to very soon.
Yeah.
And then went on to win races in Thundersaloons. Yes,
we did. Yeah, we'll come on to that later. Yeah,
which we will touch on.
Yeah.
But, Jerry, thank you for tuning in. Very good to hear from you, my friend. And also Roger Algar. He said, I remember you in juniors karting. Also, when you raced in Formula Talbot in the early 80s,
you know what? I completely forgot about that. Yeah,
driving a Spartan. He said, I also raced Spartans in Formula Ford and had a one-off drive in Formula Talbot at Alton Park in Paul Jackson's car. That will mean a lot more to you than it does to me.
My apologies. I completely forgot about doing some races in full Talbot. I mean, completely. So which was interesting because they didn't run on petrol. They were way ahead of their time. They ran on methanol.
Oh, right.
So we'll come on to that. So I think we need to get back to getting out of carts and going racing in cars, I think. Yeah.
Yes, we shall. But thank you, Roger. We'll come to that. Darren Morley has said that someone's grassed you up. That was obviously from the drinking thing.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Although it wasn't the same weekend. This was like 3 years later. But
yes.
Yeah. But sure. I think Darren's right.
Yeah. We'll find them. So yes, you've done karting. Excuse me. So you've done karting. You've raced against a certain Mr. Prost and other folk. When did you first start casting your eyes towards car racing? And I guess was it single seaters was always your preferred route?
So I did a couple of races at the end of 1975 at Brands Hatch in a Hawk, in an old Hawk, and we soon realised that really wasn't the car to have. And at the time, Jeff Lees was winning everything in Formula Ford 1600 and a Royale RP21. And we thought that was the car to get, and we did. My father's garage prepared the engine. I was going to say engines, but we only had the one, prepared the engine. And off we went racing. And we did all right, actually. I mean, I ended up winning the championships. It was the first time they'd run this thing called the Dunlop Star Tomorrow. There's various very well-known people were in it and went on to do it in the other years as well. So I don't know how many years it ran. I think about 10 years or something like that. But it was quite competitive. I won it. David Leslie came second. James Weaver came third, and David Sears came fourth. So there were some people who went on and had long careers in in racing, all from starting in Formula Ford in 76. But I must tell you a funny story. So at the time, I was going out with a girl, and her father was very friendly with the ex train robber Roy James.
Oh yeah.
He'd been entertained elsewhere for quite some years, and in fact, when he was caught by the police after the Great Train Robbery, he was actually caught at Goodwood driving a Formula Junior. So he was mad on racing, and when he learned that his best friend's daughter was going out with someone who was doing motor racing, he was very intrigued, and he then became much more intrigued when he realised that my father was Ian Walker, because my father ran a Formula Junior team at the time when he was trying to get into juniors. So it all made kind of sense, really. So we spent a lot of time together, and he ended up getting a Royal RP21, the same as we had, and doing some of the Dunlop Style Tomorrow races and other races. But the thing was, second from last round at Mallory Park, I had a nightmare in qualifying, was about 8th on the grid or something, and Roy had his best qualifying, was on the outside of the front row. And in those days, the grids were 3-2-3, and he was on the outside of the front row with the daunting Gerards coming up to meet you. So the flag went out. I got a pretty good start, went into Gerards in about 7th place or something like that, came out of Gerards. Oh, I missed the most important bit. Roy had said to me beforehand, Sean, what happened to you in qualifying? And I said, I really don't know. We think it was this, but we'll find out in the race. He said, well, look, if I can help you in any way, I will. I had no idea what he meant, right? How's he going to help me? Anyway, went into Gerards in 8th place or 7th place, whatever it was, came out of Gerards in 1st place because there was this almighty shunt halfway round Gerards, and Roy was involved in it. Now, I had no idea if this was intentional or what, or was this what he meant by helping me out? I don't know. Anyway, I won the race. And it was only this year, so this was 1976, it was only this year, 2023. I happened to mention this to Ian Titchmarsh in the BRDC clubhouse at Silverstone. And I said, because Roy James' name came up in conversation, and I told him this story, and he said, I can shine some light on that for you, Sean. And I said, you're kidding, how? He said, because Nigel Mansell was on the front row, and he said to me, and he said, I was commentating that day, or I was reporting for Motoring News or something or other, and Mansell couldn't believe what Roy James did as they turned in. He just turned in on everyone, right? So Roy obviously didn't have much of an imagination, because he obviously thought he'd come out of this completely fine, but so happens he did. So there we are. So all those years later, I now know that he did. It's a terrible thing to say, but he did help me out. And I only found that out about 6 months ago at Silverstone.
47 years.
Yeah.
And it all fit together. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So there we are. So we did that. So we won that, and then we were encouraged to get the next year's Royale, which was an RP24, and Alan Cornick of Royale was very keen for us to do that. So he made us a very good deal. We were a bit thin on budget, but we started off fairly well. But then the money ran out. And that was that. In the meantime, over that winter, Terry Fullerton, just going back to Terry, contacted me and said, "Oh, I hear Formula Ford's going well for you. I'd love to have a go in one. Can you try and help me?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." And I contacted Alan Cornick of Royal. I said, "Look, this is guys. He's a fantastically quick. He's multiple world champion in karting. He'd like to have a go. Can he come along and have a go in the car that you're sort of testing for people and so on and so forth?" He said, "Yeah, great." Anyway, so Terry came along, had a go. It was on the old Grand Prix circuit at Silverstone. And within about 5 laps, he came in, minus the side pods. And if anyone knows what RP24 looks like, it's got these 2 side pods on the side. He came in minus both of those because he'd been over the curbs at great speed. These things flew off. He spun it. And he came in, got out of the car and said, "Don't like that." And that was it.
Wow. See, when we spoke with Terry, as you alluded to, he didn't mention that.
Well, it happened. Take it from me. Yeah, or from Alan Cornick. It happened. Yeah.
Perhaps not Terry's finest moment, but But he had
He did have another go in a Formula Ford about 10 years later or something like that. Okay. In a Swift or something, it might have been. I might be wrong.
No, but he was very good in karts. Absolutely,
it was fantastic. And in those days, I mean, I don't know if he said to you, but in those days, he was sponsored by Marlboro as a kart driver, and he was earning huge money. I mean, and they wanted to put him straight into Formula 2, straight from karts. But he realised that was a bit a bit ridiculous, especially after his Formula Ford antics.
Yeah. Yes. Not sure how that would have ended, but yeah.
No.
But obviously, I always describe him as like the godfather of British karting, Terry, isn't he? He's still making chassis and doing very well out of it. So
Yeah.
if Terry does see this, we obviously hope he's very well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
lovely chap, lovely chap. So yeah, you said that like this was what is it 70? We're talking 76, wasn't it? You said for this
Yeah, that was the start of our
incident at Mallory Park, and then
we got an RP24. We ran out of money, and then I spoke to Marcus Pye at Autosport, very young Marcus Pye at Autosport, and said, "Look, could you do me a favour? We've stopped racing. We're going to have to sell the car and everything." I said, "Could you put a little thing in your section in the back, just saying, looking for a drive, blah blah blah." And these two lads from the West Country phoned up and said, "We've got this car. It's not very good, but if you want to race it, you can. All you've got to do is bring along an engine." And okay, fine. So we built an engine, and we met at the Tiger factory, which was either in Reading or Maidenhead, one or the other. It wasn't a proper Tiger chassis. It was actually an MRE one, which was the forerunner to Tiger. Anyway, I went up there with a pal of mine, and we fitted this engine in the back of the Formula Ford. Neither of us really had a clue what we were doing. And it took about 8 hours to put this engine or something. I'm amazed that the thing actually worked. But anyway, it did. And we had a lot of fun with it. We won a couple of races with it. And we managed to get to the Formula Ford Festival, and we got through to the final in this piece of shit. And because it was the only Tiger that got through to the final, suddenly we had Tim Schenkin and Howden Gandy come down and sort of try and give us some help. And they said, "Look, do you mind if we check the setup on it? Because we might be able to make it quicker." I said, "Well, anything. Great, fantastic." And they went around it and measured it all up and said, "We don't know how you're driving this because it's all over the place." So they put it as it should be. I didn't go any quicker. I don't know if that reflects badly on me or the way they set it up, but anyway, I didn't go any quicker. So that was that. The 77 started quite well with a new car that had to get sold. Was able to keep on racing because of the generosity of these two guys who we had great fun. Then 78, we managed to get together some money to buy a Van Diemen, and that was the car to really have. And it was the year of Kenny Aitchison and Michael Rowe and Bernini and Roberto Guerrero and loads of them. I mean, it was an unbelievably competitive year. I mean, it was just fantastic.
Very talented.
I managed to win a round of Townsend Tolleson Championship somehow. But I was over that year. I was over driving the car like crazy. And in fact, at Alton Park, I reckon I had a shunt there, or came off there, or spun there on literally every corner. Admittedly, it was the short circuit, not the full circuit. But it was, I was just over driving it horrendously. So 78 started off very well, and it was okay, but a bit of a damp squib really. And that was it for several years. Didn't have any money, didn't know how to go and get any money in those days, until Formula Talbot came along, and I'd completely forgotten all about that.
Okay.
And I can't remember how it happened now. Somebody said, "Oh, you might want to have a go in these. They're desperate for people to do it because they only had like 8 cars on the grid or something like that." And there was a dealer, a Talbot dealer. I mean, a lot of people listening to this may not even know what a Talbot is. But anyway, there was a Talbot dealer. There we go. Right. So Talbot was, I was going to say, it was, how do I describe it? Well, that's not, we won't describe it. Let's just say they were pretty useless. The cars that they used, it was a Talbot engine, 1.6 engine, running on methanol, or was it 1.8? I can't remember. Anyway, but slick tyres. And actually, they handled pretty well. And a chassis called a Spartan, which is run by Paul Jackson, and it was pretty good. And we had lots of fun in it. But it was run by a guy called Trevor Twaits, who was a big Chevron man. Had a couple of big dealerships up in Dewsbury, up in Yorkshire, and places like that. And he was very generous and helped us out. And that enabled us really to sort of get some momentum going again. And I ended up doing Formula Ford 2000 in 1983.
Okay.
But unfortunately made a bit of a mistake. We went to watch the last round at 82 at Donington, and Russell Spence won it in a Pilbeam, and we thought, well, that's clearly the car to have. Unfortunately, we didn't really realise that. I think it was a special engine for selling cars, if you know what I mean.
Right.
We certainly didn't have one of those engines. Anyway, it started off okay. The first was we were teammates, being run by the same team, was Swallow Racing, And I qualified 5th and Russell qualified 6th, and it all started reasonably well. Russell lost interest in it completely, and by the 2nd round or 3rd round, had convinced the team owner to go and buy a Reynard, which was a great decision, because that was the car to have. We carried on with the Pilgrim. It just got slower and slower and slower as everyone else got more used to their cars and just got quicker and quicker and quicker. I think the best result I had all year was a 4th or something like that. It was very competitive, but the only good thing that came out of that year was I got to know Richard Dutton. These days, people know of him as Fortec, but in those days, it was Richard Dutton Racing.
Right.
And Richard was running some Royale Sports 2000s. Anyway, he said, look, why don't you come and have a go in one of these? And you can actually do the Thundersports race at Brands Hatch for supporting the British Grand Prix in the Thundersports. I said, okay, we'll do that. I said, it's a 2-driver thing. Who am I doing it with? He said, you're doing it with Frank Bradley. You know him because he's doing Formula Ford 2000. I said, yeah, I know Frank. Yeah, great. So there we are. We turn up. We do ever so well. But here's the thing. When you're in that sort of time in racing, if you've made it, you think you're going to turn up and the car's going to have Marlboro on it or John Player Special or something like that, right? We had Bradley's Jellied Eels. That's what we had on the side of the car, right? So, which was no problem with that. Everyone's got to earn their living, right? But it wasn't quite what you had in mind, really, when you first thought about making a career in motor racing. Anyway, we finished 8th overall and won the class by a margin. And so I thought, well, this Sports 2000 is the way to go, really. So I did that in '84. I won the championship in the road in terms of points, but I then had a win take. In fact, the following year's British Grand Prix meeting, I won the support race there. And in post-race scrutiny, they found that the fire extinguisher was empty. Nothing to do with us because we didn't run the car. And we were still overweight. So anyway, rules are rules. So we lost that. So we lost the championship because of that. But the good thing that came out of that was, at the end of that year, we met Marvin Humphreys, who a lot of people will know now from British touring cars. And he'd set up a team called Tech Speed. And it was financed by a guy called Gil Baird, who used to be involved in a thing called Team Elite. So anyone with a bit of old Lotus knowledge will know about Team Elite. They set up this thing. Marvin was an ex-mechanic, Hans Stuck mechanic on the ATS Formula One team. We got on ever so well with both him and his wife, Sandra. And we went and did Sports 2000 in a car called a Shrike. I don't know if anyone knows what that looks like, but
I know what the bird looks like, but
there's one. Can you see that?
Oh,
right.
That's very cool.
Yeah, it's quite a funky looking thing, really.
That's a very funky thing, yeah.
Yeah, and the deal there, because that reminds me, so on the car there was MFI. So how did that come about? So my parents knew the founders of MFI. For those people who can remember that was a huge furniture chain in the 80s, 90s, and early noughties before it all went tits up. It was suggested that they might like to get involved in motor racing. Anyway, they said, well, we can put up, I think it was, 20 grand or something like that, which wasn't enough. But they said, but every race you win bonus, 3 grand, right, which is a lot of money. This is 1985. So I took that to Marvin and I said, I haven't got the money to do the whole thing. However, got a deal for you. And he said, oh, I can't say yes to that, but that's exactly the sort of thing that Gil will like. So Gil then phoned me and said, heard about this interesting proposal. How many races are you going to win? And I said, not too sure, but if I had to guess, let's go for this 15 races in the season. Let's go for half of them, 7. So 7 threes are 21. So he said, it would be better if it's more, but I'll take that. I'll take those 7 wins. So no pressure, right? No pressure. Anyway, we ended up winning, I think we ended up winning 10 of them or something and winning the championship. So he was very, very happy. But that's so it looked like we had bags of money from MFI because the whole thing was presented beautifully by Tech Speed and Marvin and Sandra and everyone else who was there. But it was all on a win bonus. So, yeah.
It was like a like performance-based pay type thing, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, that's brilliant.
There's more than one way to skin a cat, as they say. So
absolutely, you can present anything if if you dress it up nicely enough. No, I was just in a comment here. It said from Oliver Taylor, evening Ollie. He said, I need to see a picture of that. The Bradley's Jelly Deals livery must rival that of Golf and JPS.
Well,
I think,
you
I
may
think it
think,
needs to
you
be
may
brought
think that, Oliver, but I'm not so sure.
back. Just wait until the I don't
Yeah.
know, until the the fridge magnets and goodness knows what Bradley's come out. It's going to fly.
Yeah, but the good thing that came out of that, apart from winning the championship, two things actually. One was that we wanted to have a go in Formula 3, and one of the competitors in Sports 2000, a lovely guy called Tony Westwood, who certain people will know of his son Julian, who was a very quick racer in his own right. And
He did F3, didn't he? I'm sure he
did
did
F3 both here and in Japan, I think, from memory.
Yeah,
It was a
yeah, I
quick drive.
remember
I
the
think he
name.
did some Formula 3000. A bit of this and a bit of that. It was very quick, lovely guy. I bump into him all the time now because he runs the Toro Verde GT team.
Oh, okay.
He's running cars, the Genettas in GT4, and he's also running a couple of Porsche Carrera Cup cars and a Cayman car and things like that. He's a really nice guy. Anyway, his father Tony said to me one day, "What do you want to do next year, Sean?" And I said, "Well, I really love to have a go in Formula 3. I thought I was going to be doing Formula 3 like 7 years earlier, but I'd love to have a go at it." Anyway, he said, "Well, if I can help you out in any way, let me know." I thought, why is he saying that? That's very generous of him, but why is he saying it? Anyway, I collared him a bit later on. I said, "Can we talk about that comment a little bit more?" He said, "I'm glad you've come back to me." He said, "What I really want is I want an introduction to MFI." And I said, "Okay, so why?" And he is in the business of making computer stationery, so all the reams of computer paper, right? And very sensibly, he worked out that an organization like that would get through millions of pounds worth of that stuff a year. And I said, "Fine." I said, "Look, I can give you all the contacts. I'll have a chat with them. I'll lay it all ready for you." I said, "But I can't guarantee a thing." He said, "No, no." He said, as long as you give me the contacts, I'll top up whatever you're short of to go and do this Formula 3 race. I'll top it up." Anyway, gave him the contact. He was good to his word. There's the car. Right. You can see Datamatic. See Datamatic there?
Yeah.
Above the MFI. Yeah. Anyway, so I like props, as you can tell. Yeah.
You love a prop.
Yeah, nothing wrong with the prop. Anyway, so Tony was very kind. We did that, and this was the at Silverstone Grand Prix circuit before the British Grand Prix because the F3s were supporting it, and it was in Class B. In those days, you had about 18 Class A cars on the grid and about 20 Class B cars on the grid. So the grids were massive. Anyway, I managed to win the Class B section, and on the back of that, MFI said, and also Tony said, "Why don't you do this support meeting at the British Grand Prix?" And I said, "Great." So we did it again. Didn't do quite so well. Finished third, and that then led with Tech Speed to go and do Formula 3 in '86. So we won the Sports 2000 Championship. I'd shown that I could be quick in a Formula 3, having not driven a single seater for a while. And so we went and did Class B in Formula 3 in '86 in an ex-Russell Spence Walt. That all went pretty well. I finished second in Class B in the championship. Won quite a few races in it. Had a few DNFs, which didn't help in the overall standings, but we finished second in it. And that was all good stuff. Unfortunately, at that point, I thought MFI were going to be around for a while, but some serious movements went on, and corporate decisions were taken, which changed all that. But anyway, it was great fun.
Yeah, excellent. And around that time, and obviously, you mentioned you're in a different class, but obviously on that grid around that time, there was the likes of there's like Martin Donnelly was making his way towards F1, who we spoke with recently, and was it Maurizio Sala and Herrick Van Cowan, and it was a good sort of.
Oh, there was a lot of good people in it.
Some good men there.
Oh, I'll tell you the other thing that I did in '84. Actually, I've always forgotten all about this. Was that I ended up doing the Will Hire 24-hour race, and that was the first time I ever drove anything with a roof on.
Was that the Snetterton?
Yes, the Snetterton Will. It was a big thing in the day then.
Yeah.
And I did it in an Opel Monza 3-litre with Jerry Marshall, Roger Clark. For those who've got long memories, he was a fantastic rally driver at that time, and David Sears, who I raced against years earlier in Formula Ford. And we were doing okay. We weren't doing fantastically, but we were doing okay. No idea where we were running. And it was the whole thing came to a bit of a sad end, really, because David ended up putting the car into the barriers at Corham. But the thing was, 2 weeks later, he signed a contract with Tom Walkinshaw to drive one of the Jaguars in the European Touring Car Championship. So I phoned David up, and I said, bloody hell! I said, if I'd have known that, I'd have crashed it a lot earlier than that. So anyway, you never know what's around the corner, do you?
No, exactly. It just goes to show that, when you think you've had an accident, then, this isn't going to look good.
No, exactly.
It can always turn
how
around.
you do it.
Well, wow. Obviously, working for Tom Walkinshaw, especially at that time, was pretty cool, wasn't it?
Oh, I've just seen a message here from Jim Edwards.
I was just going to say, is that the Jim Edwards that I think it is?
Yes, it is. Jim Edwards Jr. Lovely man. Very quick driver. Yeah.
Yeah.
Looking forward to a cold beer with you next week. Yeah, so am I. Fantastic.
Oh,
yeah.
That sounds lovely. Lovely. Good evening, Jim. I do hope you're well. Yes. Good man.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's where we were up till there, really. And then what happened after that? It all kind of fizzled away a little bit, really. This is all sort of doing stuff that sort of eventually led up to touring cars, really. But
yeah.
Well, 87 really not much happened. The only good thing that happened in 87 through our business FAI, I ended up doing an exhibition in Las Vegas.
Ooh, nice.
And I got to the exhibition hall early, and my shoes were looking filthy, and for whatever reason, and there was a shoe shine stand there, so I thought I'll get them all buffed up, look great. So went on this. People are probably wondering, where's this leading? Anyway, went on the shoe shine stand. And this other guy got up, also a Brit, also wearing disgustingly dirty shoes. And being two Brits, having our shoes polished, we started chatting. Turns out he was the sales director for a clutch company called Laycock, no longer around. Okay, but anyway, it was a big thing in the day. And we started chatting, and then we agreed to meet up later on that evening for a beer, which we did. And I suddenly thought, well, there might be a sponsorship opportunity here. So I sort of laid the groundwork, and he said, yeah, well, you never know. Let's keep in touch. I said, yeah, great, okay. Anyway, a year later, Laycock was bought by LUK, or Luke, whoever you want to say it, huge OE equipment clutch manufacturer, one of the biggest in the world. And I thought, oh, this could be interesting because they're already heavily involved in motorsport in Formula 3000 with Michael Bartels and various other German drivers, and in the DTM in Germany and all that sort of stuff.
Wow.
Anyway, so cut long story short, did a deal. So there was no PowerPoint presentation. There was no official presentation. It all came about through two guys wearing very, very dirty shoes and having a bit of a laugh on a shoe shine stand. And that led to me having sponsorship from them for 2.5 years. And it was very good money.
That's fantastic. That is why you talk to people.
Yeah.
Just have a chat. You never know where it's going to lead.
Exactly. Just be nice. You never know.
Yeah. Just be nice, especially if they might have a couple of quid behind them.
Yeah. Well, at the time, I didn't. At the time, I looked at him and saw the state of his shoes, and I thought he was fucking penniless, as he probably did about me.
He's thinking, "Oh God, look at the state of us here in Vegas." Wow. Well, there's the old saying: "What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas." Not
on that occasion. No, I
definitely
didn't want it to stay there.
No, absolutely brilliant. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I just can't see that happening now. I can't. People.
Well, yeah, I'm not so sure. I think, yes, of course, you have to do very professional presentations, but sometimes, there are opportunities that come one's way, not just to do with motor racing, but just in life generally, in business, in relationships, or whatever. But you've just got to be open to them.
Yeah.
Right? And just walk around with an open mentality, not thinking what's in it for me every time, but just this might be an interesting person. It might have an interesting story to tell me.
Yeah.
You don't know, So, and it's certainly helped me over the years, I must say. Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right. I think it's the best way to be, isn't it? Just have a chat with people, and you might be able to help each other out. And obviously, it worked in that case.
Yeah.
It's terrific. Excuse me. Excuse me.
Right.
Right. So just sort of moving on. We're going to come to the BTCC in a minute. I know a few people want to get onto that, but you did was it British C2 Championship?
Yeah. So in 1987, the only thing that was quite interesting was that I was asked by a German Group C team called URD. Probably most people have never heard of them. To be honest, I don't think I'd heard of them much at the time either. But anyway, they came on. They said they wanted someone who was quick around Brands Hatch, and so happens they had a mechanic working for them. This comes back to what I was saying just now: keep an open mind and be nice to people, because they had a German mechanic who used to work in the British Formula 3 Championship, and I'd always had, whenever I saw him in the pits, I'd always say, "Hi, how are you?" Blah blah blah, and he recommended me to the owner of the team. Anyway, so they phoned me up and said, "Would you like to do this race?" And I said, "Yeah, great." Anyway, so that's what a URD looks like.
Oh, that's very nice.
Okay, so that's just coming down from Paddock Hill Bend.
Nice little sporty number.
Yeah, and most C2 cars in those days had obviously Cosworth DFVs. That had a straight six BMW in it, and it was actually quite a nice torquey engine. But it wasn't the best of things. I think I blotted my copybook a bit when I said, because it was a URD, right? So I said, do you have a test car? And they said no. I said, that's a shame, because otherwise that would be a turd. So they didn't like that. Can't think why. No sense of humour, the Germans, you see.
You're kidding.
No, sadly not. No. Yeah. Anyway,
I would love to have seen that on the side of a car.
Yeah. So, so because of doing that, they then announced that there was going to be a British C2 Championship for 1988, and we knew Keith Green, or my father knew Keith Green from years and years ago, from the 60s, and he was running a car in the World Group C Championship for a Greek guy called Kostas Los.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And he wanted to sell that car to get a much better car, which was the Spice, and that was the car to have. I mean, that was just seconds quicker. Anyway, so we did a deal to buy this Tiger, and it was a shame, really. The championship never really took off. The first round, I think there was 6 or 7 cars on the grid. It got bigger and bigger as it went on. Anyway, we ended up, I did it with a guy that I'd met in Formula 3, a guy called Paul Stott, and we always got on fairly well. In fact, we also raced against each other in Sports 2000 as well. Again, you see, be nice to people, chat to people, blah, blah, blah. And he came in with 50% of the budget, and we had a lot of fun. And I ended up on exactly the same number of points as Tim Harvey, but he had one more second place. So he won the championship. Wow. If it had been done on fastest laps, I'd have won it, but it was done on second places. So there we are. So that was my first time coming across Tim. And of course, we were then going to get to know each other a lot better, because we both went in. Well, he was already in touring cars in '88 anyway, but yeah. I went into touring cars in '89. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Which is probably a good way to lead into the BTCC. I mean, there's a load of BTCC fans watching this, so I'm sure they're going to.
Oh, Jones has just come on. I've just seen Jones.
Yeah, it's just popped up. Carl Jones, another. Yeah. The RS 500 crew.
And I think he was one of the 50% of the grid who was definitely pissed in the race at Silverstone in 1989. Definitely.
Thank you, Carl, for tuning in, and that's your welcome.
I dropped you right in it.
It was a long time ago. It's fine. But no, Carl, thank you for tuning in. Always great to hear from you. So we've got some of the what I call the best era of the BTCC grid. We've got 3 of the RS 500 races here. You got Carl, Jerry, and obviously Sean himself, which is lovely to see. Now we spoke a couple of days ago, and you said that you'd previously not looked down your nose at the tin top side of things, but your background was in the single seaters. How did the just hang on, Darren Morley's just said Fluxy must have been one of the drink. Yes.
No,
was he not?
No, he wasn't actually. No, because Fluxy wasn't on the grid.
I didn't make it. See.
No. So,
sorry, Fluxy, if you're tuning in. I'm sorry, mate. No, very good. But yeah, you had come from the single seater world, and I guess you said you'd only done a little bit of like racing with a roof.
Well, just the ones at Snetterton. Yeah.
Yes, and then obviously in the C2 a bit. But then, how did you come to be behind the wheel of, in my book, the greatest touring car in history with the RS 500?
Well, a bit of luck, really, because we were very fortunate in selling the C2 car at the end of the year to Nicola Falston, actually. People will remember her father, John Falston, who used to own Brands Hatch and whatever else. And we sold it to her. She had some wealthy client who was going to run it. I think he disappeared, actually, so I don't know what she did with the car. But anyway, so we sold the car, and we thought, what are we going to do? And there was a British Formula 3000 Championship. We thought that might be good to go and do. So I went and tested a car around Silverstone Grand Prix circuit, the GA Motorsport. That all went very well. And within about 8 laps, I was doing times that would have put me on the 8th row of the grid or something like that. So that was all pretty good, for that short amount of time. Until I had to stop, because I suddenly realized all the corners were looking very different to how they had been when I first went out in the car. And it was only I realized that instead of looking at the corners like this, I was looking at the corners like this, because my neck muscles had completely gone. So driving a Group C car had like no downforce in comparison. And the Formula 3000 cars around the old Grand Prix circuit, I mean, were seriously quick.
Yeah.
And I'm very quick around the corners. And my neck muscles completely went. And so we tried that, quite like that. And Graham Good, who was also in our line of business in the automotive aftermarket, was also a customer of ours.
Right.
So we spoke to Graham, and he said, "Yeah, come up and have a go in one of these." And I really didn't know much about the Sierras and everything else, really, as I say, because in those days, a lot of people who were doing single-seaters and sports cars, didn't really think too much about. And this is just as touring cars were really starting to sort of take off.
Yeah.
And anyway, so went along to Snetterton, it was, to have a go in this thing. I was completely unprepared for it. He said, "You might find it a bit lively," right? He wasn't overselling that, really. I mean, I came in after 3 laps, and clearly my eyes were kind of out here somewhere. And he said, "How did you find that?" I said, "Fucking frightening, actually," which wasn't really the response he was looking for. Anyway, so but we thought, this is definitely doable. And of course, it was all on BBC Grandstand. We thought, well, we can definitely get some sponsors to come in on this. And we did, and we managed to get three different sponsors to come in, and we did the season. And it was a bit of a baptism of fire, because I really, the first couple of races, I was sort of struggling to find my way, but gradually we got there, and we got a bit quicker, and so on and so forth. But they were just, I mean, it was like being strapped to the side of an Exocet, really. I mean, they were just so quick, and they only had skinny little tires on them. Oh, wow. Stuart Dent. Wow, Stuart. Oh, great guy. Yeah.
Stuart, and I just want to say, while we're on air and live, I want to say a huge thank you to Stuart Dent. He's been a great supporter and very, very helpful, and a lovely, lovely guy. I've not met him, but he comes across as being lovely. So, Stuart, if you ever need a pint and you're in the area, there's a pint.
Well, he can come down and have a drink with both of us then, because, in fact, we'll talk about this later. It was Stuart that really got me and the company into motorbike racing, which we'll come on to later.
Oh, we certainly shall. Yes.
We'll talk about that later. But it was because of Stuart and bumping into him at the Autosport show Stuart would probably remember this, but it's something like 2008 or 2000. Yeah, it's about 2008, I think. Anyway, digress. So where were we? Oh yeah, so 89 ended up getting much quicker in the thing, and it was great, and it was a great atmosphere, and there was loads of people getting involved, and there were loads of new sponsors coming into it, and there were good grids. I mean, I think the 2-litre thing, non-turbo, was getting bigger and bigger, and that's obviously where it ended up. And unfortunately, the Sierras really were just too quick for their own good, because no other manufacturer could compete with them.
Yeah.
And whilst we were all happy just racing Sierra RS 500s, I think that the powers, in control of everything, really wanted there to be a more mixed grid rather than everything looking the same.
Yeah, because it was almost like 2/3, almost 3/4 of the grid were RS 500s, weren't they? Which obviously wouldn't fly at all today, but I think they look brilliant.
And they were, and they belched out massive flames on the overrun. They spun their wheels in virtually every gear. I mean, they were. Well, they did on the tires that we were running anyway, but they were just fantastic fun. I mean, amazing. Yeah. So anyways, we did that in 89, and at the end of that, I was then able to bring the Luke money in from the guy on the shoe shine stand, although it wasn't him. A guy controlling all the purse strings in Germany, Mr. Walter Demel. He was a very nice man. He was a big pipe smoker. So how I got to know him better was I bought him a pipe from Dunhill's. Okay. Which he was very grateful for.
On the subject of pipes, and if Jerry Marnie is still watching this, he's going to know where I'm going with this. If you saw the Jerry Marnie chat, Jerry has some incredible tales from some of the hijinks that he and Sean and many others got up to, and he mentioned an incident with Lawrence Bristow's pipe, and it being urinated through about a 750-pound pipe, and he said that you were there. Can you confirm?
Well, but if this was the night before the British Grand Prix support meet, I could well have been there, but not known it. That's the problem.
Oh, goodness me. But
anyway, so for 1990, sorry,
no,
Rich, go on.
Just very quickly, while we're on the subject of RS500 drivers, just about the speed and the pace of them. I know it was tweaked up for Bathurst and things like that. I spoke with Rob Gravitt about it, and he said he was doing 189 miles an hour down the Conrod Straight in an RS 500.
Yeah,
Which
I can believe it.
even 3 years after he told me that, it's still absolutely it blows my mind.
Yeah.
I mean, that's F1 speed.
Well, let me tell you, one of the biggest highlights for me was driving them around the streets of Birmingham.
Oh, yes.
Which was fantastic. I mean, how often do you get to do about 150 or 160 miles an hour past the mosque? Doesn't happen often, does it? Unless you're being chased by the Taliban in Kabul. Apart from that, you're not going to be doing that sort of speed past the mosque very often.
Absolutely not. And which sort of brings us on actually quite nicely to into 1990, because you came, I think it was 1990, you came second there in Birmingham. And as you allude to, I mean, it was, on the face of it, it was a ridiculous concept. I mean, it was like, what on earth? But then when it all came together, every single person who tuned in, saw it on the TV, went to see it live, I guarantee to a person they will say it was fabulous.
It was great. I mean, it had a bit of everything. I mean, it had some monstrous long straights. It had some fast corners. It had slow corners. There was a little bit of elevation to it. I can't remember the names of the corners there, but there was one bit. You went past the mosque, turned right, down a little bit, and then there was two left-handers, and you came back up again. But yeah, it was just. There's something about street circuits. I really like street circuits. I just think there's something magic about them, really, and I think it's a great equalizer, because you can't go and spend days and days, pounding around there to find those extra few tenths. So it's a bit of a leveler, really. Yeah,
I fully agree. And anyone who's tuned into any of these will know of my love of a street circuit. I just think, for those reasons, it's a real test, a genuine test. If you get it wrong, you're done.
Yeah.
And I think that's what drivers love. Okay, it may not, certainly in F1 at the moment, Monaco, it may not be the spectacle that all the fans want it to be, but I've always said racing has got to be about driver skill first.
Yeah,
and that's why I love a street circuit.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So that was great fun. I mean, in 1990, I mean, it was the engine was Andy Rouse's engines were so much better. And for me, the ideal world would have been the car that I had with Graham and the engine that I had with Andy. That would have been absolutely perfect. But I made a bit of a mistake at the beginning of the year, because the first few test sessions we went to, I was sort of trading times with Andy. And so I thought, this is all pretty good. This is all going to pan out well. And gradually, as the season went on, I find myself not being quite as quick as I was at the beginning of the year, and having an awful lot of DNFs. And it was only about 3 or 4 years later that I discovered, because this was the last year of the Sierras, and I don't think that Andy was terribly keen in keeping me as up to date with replacement parts as he was. In the last 3 races, I had failures in all 3 races, and 2 of them I would have been on the podium. All because of failures, which were all because of things that are timed out but not getting changed, really, which is a great shame.
It was, Andy was helping himself, shall we say, perhaps a little bit. I mean, I must say, 1990 is a season that sticks out in my mind. We've got to mention this. Rob Gravitt won the championship, and there's all talk about Yokohamas, and he said it wasn't to do with the Yokohamas, but.
No, it's not. Those tyres, there was nothing special about them at all. No, nothing. I mean, it's quite funny. Rob gets so defensive when you mention it to him about those tyres.
That's why I brought it up.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, no, he does. He gets very defensive about it. But here's something. I mean, we mentioned Graham Good earlier on. He managed to get hold of a set of used Yokohamas, and I can't remember if it was an 89 or 90. And he put them on his car, didn't adjust the geometry or anything to suit the tyres, and went 0.7 of a second quicker than he had ever been before on new Pirellis, and that was on a set of used. So there was no doubt about it. They were a better tyre. They were. Yeah.
And
listen, but half of any sport is making the best of what you've got and making sure you have the best that is available.
Absolutely.
And that's what they did.
Yeah. And there's nobody can knock anyone for doing that, for sure.
Quite.
Just one thing I did want to touch on, though. You got your first podium finish at Silverstone in 1990. I was there. Strange.
there we go.
I don't want to bring age into it, but
Yeah.
I was 9. But I remember it because all the RS 500s look fantastic. And you came second. I mean, that must have been a good feeling. To get on the podium for the first time in BTCC,
Yeah.
home of British motorsport. Pretty good.
Yeah, it was good actually, and it was quite funny because I remember I think it was Fluxy actually who came up to me afterwards, and he said, "You'll love this, Sean." He said the commentator, because I think Rob won it, I came second, and Andy was third, and at one point the commentator said, "Oh, will Walker give up his place to Rouse as their teammates because it's important for Andy for the championship and everything else?" And Fluxy said, "Oh, you'd have loved all that." I mean, as if you would. Yeah, no chance. So no, I mean, I mean, I had So second at Silverstone and second at Birmingham, I think you said, yeah.
And I said that you were
Yeah.
third at Brands Hatch Indy as well on my
Yeah.
research, behind Rob and Tim. So
Yeah. Oh, I must mention in '89 in this year, as they had a 2-driver race.
Yes.
And we're completing a bit of a circle here because I've mentioned earlier on with my father's team, Ian Walker Racing, with Colin Chapman and Graham Hill and so on. And in '89, they had this first time that they had a 2-driver race, and it was at Donington. So we got Damon to do it.
Oh,
and it was my father's suggestion, and he said, "Look." And at the time, to be perfectly honest, Damon was racing in Formula 3000, but I mean, he was struggling a bit financially, and people quite often think that he had a lot of money behind him, but all that was taken away with the terrible tragedy that befell his father and his family and so on.
Yes.
And
which is borne out in his book.
Yes, and it's a brilliant book. Yeah, I've read it.
Book.
Yeah. And anyway, so we asked Damon to do it, paid him the massive sum of £500, not bad for a future world champion. And we did it, and we would have finished third in that. But when Damon was driving, we lost fourth gear with about 5 laps to go or something like that. So a podium at that time would have been really, really good in '89, but it wasn't to be. And then there was two driver races in '90, one at Donington and one at Brands Hatch Indy Circuit, and Fluxy did it. And by his own admission, he drove like a twat at Donington. And he said, he just said, "I'm terribly sorry, Sean. That wasn't my finest hour." And then when we went to Brands, and it all went fairly well. But it was a great example of how good the Yokohamas were, because Mike Smith, lovely guy, and he was okay, but he wasn't the quickest. And Fluxy just couldn't keep up with him. And he came in and he said, "Oh God, I feel embarrassed, about where I finished," type thing. And I said, "Well, don't be so ridiculous. Not your fault." Yeah. Anyway, so that was quite interesting. I don't know why they've never brought that back, 2-driver races, because it was very good. It introduced pit stops. So if you're listening, Alan, reintroduce them.
Absolutely. And I know someone who's going to see Alan Gale very soon, so I'm going to keep at him for that. So come on. Yeah. And Andrew Bishop in the comments, he's just said that he loved the late 80s BTCC 2-driver endurance races.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well,
so
look,
agree.
If we all pester Alan and say to him, why don't you have a go at doing this again? You never know.
Let's all bombard him with fan mail in inverted commas. Yeah, fantastic. Also, just going back, we've got Jerry Marney. He said that the Birmingham was the best circuit. Fantastic. Andrew calls it the Monaco of the Midlands. Absolutely. And I've just seen we've got Paul Linfoot, who's coming, Mr. RS 500 Cosworth, as we call him. He said he was a proud owner of your car for a few years, and a great car.
Does Paul mean the '89 car or the '90 car? I wonder.
Not sure. Maybe 90. Paul, if you can tell us if it was 89 or 90, that would be great. And also, Paul, whilst you're on, thank you for putting me and Sean in touch. And we know you're going through a bit of a rough spell at the moment, so wishing you all the best, sir.
Paul's just said 89 car.
Yeah, 89. So
okay, yeah. So that was one of, because both the 89 and 90 cars were, the 89 car was owned by Graham and the 90 car was owned by Andy. Yeah.
Okay.
Just to clarify that.
Yeah, good stuff. But yes, Paul, big fan of your work. Keep it going. Absolutely brilliant. And if you don't follow Paul on Instagram and things like that, do follow him, Mr. RS 500 Cosworth.
Yeah.
Fabulous work. Yes, that comes to the end of 1990 and your time with the RS 500. You almost got into the Trackstar Sapphire. for 91.
Yeah, yeah, I did. I thought I'd suddenly cracked it because it was the first year of the non-turbo, and Trackstar were going to be, which is Mike Smith and Rob Gravett, were going to be running the Sapphire. And it was the sort of Ford team or semi-works Ford team, whatever it was. It had Shell money. It had the Yokohama tires, big plus. I did a deal with them that I was going to drive the second car alongside Rob. And all looked on paper fantastic. I got the German company Luke involved. So it was all looking great. But after the first test session, when Rob drove the car, it turned out that the car was really, it was a bit of a turd, really. And I don't mean a German Group C car. It was a bit of a turd, and no matter how much you polished it, it was never really going to be that good. They never built the second one, so that was it, really. So what started off at the beginning of the year was like fantastic, this great opportunity. Package all looked fantastic. Never happened. I did one. They got Rob's old car out, and they got it to the configuration to be able to run it as a car, because with the turbo cars you could run in 91, but they had a restrictor on it. Right. So I can't remember exactly, but it was fine up to about 6,000 RPM or whatever it was, and after that there was nothing.
Just fell off.
So you'd be like a monster, as you remembered it from the years before, coming out the corners, and suddenly it completely ran out of puff.
Yeah.
Anyway, I did the first qualifying session. I came and I said, "Look, this is ridiculous. I'm not going to do all this." Anyway, so I parked it up, and that was that. So that's all I did, other than coming back to Jerry. Lawrence Bristow had converted one of the Labatt's cars into a Thundersaloons car.
Oh yeah,
great big arches on it and big boots on it and all that sort of thing. Didn't make it any quicker, actually. I think it was actually a little bit slower, but it looked as horny as hell. And it was in Jerry's sponsors, Arquati colours. And Lawrence said, "Look, there's a few clashes between the BTCC," and he was doing it in an M3 BMW, I think. There's a few clashes between the BTCC and Thundersaloons, so I can't, in those races where it's clashing, will you race with Jerry? And I said, "Yeah, fantastic, great."
Brilliant.
And we ended up winning the championship in it. And we had a bit of fun along the way. It wasn't the most competitive of series, but it was great, and it was just nice to carry that sort of association with the car on really. So that was 91, really. Yeah.
Just in case anyone hasn't seen the Arquati livery, I just happen to have this. I love a prop as well, clearly.
Here we go.
There we are. A lovely looking car, and that's another plug for Jerry Marney.
I tell you what, if Jerry's still there, if he has got a photograph of the car in Thundersaloon spec with the big arches and the big boots on, I'd love to see a photograph of that, because I haven't got a photograph of that.
Okay, smashing. Jerry, if you're watching, that's something for you to dig out. If not, I'll send you a WhatsApp tomorrow.
Yeah.
Great stuff. But you find yourself back in the BTCC 1992 in a different car.
Yes. So again, Marvin Humphreys. So having been involved with him in Sports 2000, having been involved with him in Formula 3. Jerry says he's got a photo. Fantastic.
Can we have two, Jerry? Thanks.
Not me first.
Fair enough.
So Marvin Humphreys and Tech Speed had two M3s. They'd run them in 91. Anyway, so they pretty much had. I took Luke along to that program as well. So that was that, and there was quite a few works cars then appearing in the BTCC, and so Alan came up with a thing for like privateers, not non-works cars, and I think we finished second in it. I think I'm not 100% certain. But I have to say we had or third, whatever. But we had a lot of engine problems. The car was great. The team turned it out beautifully every time we were out. But we had a lot of engine problems, and I think if Carl's still listening, he'll remember this, because Carl did half the season. I think it was half the season. It might have been 2/3 of the season with us as well in another BMW M3. And we both had engine problems. I mean, sometimes they were quick, sometimes they weren't, and sometimes they just didn't work at all. So not really what you want. So that was kind of it. And at the end of that year, I kind of got out of the car and said, I don't want to be involved with this anymore. I found the whole thing very frustrating. It was taking up a lot of my time, taking time up away from running the business, which needed my time. And so walked away from the touring cars, really. And that was that. And I thought that was going to be it. And then we read a piece in Autosport about how Clive Chapman was going to be setting up Classic Team Lotus.
Yes.
I happened to mention it to my father and said, wouldn't this be fun? Let's go and talk to Clive. Another circle being completed. His relationship with his father, Colin Chapman, and now Clive. So we went along to Clive and we ended up buying a Lotus 87B, which was the first carbon fiber Lotus car.
The 82 car, 81, 82?
82, yeah. So that's what it looks like.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Oh,
so that's actually us at Donington after Classic Team Lotus won their first ever race. You can see the garland there.
wow.
So, and we bought this car and we had loads of fun. And this gentleman here, right, this guy here, Eddie Dennis was the main mechanic on the car. And he was just a legend, really. I mean, he'd been the mechanic for Jochen Rindt and Fittipaldi and all these sorts of people. And he was the loveliest man. He was just an absolute star. And Chris Dinage, who's also in that photograph there, just there. No, is that there? There? No, there. He still runs Classic Team Lotus now on behalf of Clive. He's still there now all these years later. And we had a fantastic time. We ended up doing 12 races in 2 years, all around Europe. I mean, went to some great circuits, Spa. Where else did we go? We went to Zandvoort. We went to Nürburgring. Went to Brno in the Czech Republic.
Yeah.
Went to some lovely circuits. And we did 12 races, won 5 of them. And in fact, the last race I did in '95 was in Brno in the Czech Republic. And it couldn't have been any better, really. We put it on pole, fastest lap, won the race. And I thought, well, it doesn't get any better than that. Time to bail out. So we did. But here's the thing. So at the time, I was on the board of the Historic Sports Car Club, and I was responsible for the historic part of Formula One.
Okay.
And so we had to vet which cars were eligible or not. And one of the rules that they had in there was that it had to be a car that was a genuine car. Couldn't have been a car that was a bitzer, right? Had to be a genuine car, and it had to be a car that was known to have been at a Grand Prix weekend and competed at a Grand Prix weekend. Anyway, so there I am in this exalted position. I've decided I'm going to pack up. And I hear that there's this guy who's looking to buy a Formula One car. He's going to buy a Williams FW08. Beautiful car, okay, ex-Rosberg or whoever.
23,
yeah. And anyway, but we knew that the car had never actually competed at a Grand Prix. It was a test car. So I contacted this guy and said, look, I'm terribly sorry, but I want to try and save your money. Because if you buy this car, you can't come and race. He said, why not? We explained it all to him. And of course, I had a bit of an agenda for telling him all this because I wanted to sell my car. so I said to him, I said, but by the way, if you are looking to buy a car, I've got a great car for sale. He said, I know your car. He said, I've seen you race it. It's a lovely car. And you don't know this, Sean. He said, but we used to be Lotus dealers in Spain.
Oh.
So I said, oh, fantastic. So I said, well, why don't you come and look at the car? He said, I will. I said, look, I'll make it easy for you. Fly into Heathrow. I'll pick you up. I'll drive you up to Norfolk, to Hethel. And you can see the car and, we'll do a deal. And he said, well, no, I won't fly into Heathrow. I'll fly into Norwich. I thought it's a strange place to fly into from Barcelona or wherever it was. And I said, why are you coming to Norwich? He said, well, I have my own plane. I said, okay. I said, leave it to me. I'll phone her. I'll see if I can arrange for you to land behind the factory on the main straight on the test track. You can do that. He said, no, I can't. I said, no, honestly, I'll see what I can do. And he said, no, Sean, I can't. It hasn't got enough runway. And I thought, cha-ching. Because obviously he didn't have a prop or a twin prop. He had a jet.
He had a few pennies in his pocket.
Yes. And luckily, we hadn't spoken about the price up until that time.
So instantly.
Yes. So that was a rather nice way to finish the season. We won the FIA series for F1 cars of that year, of band of years. Did well at the last race. Couldn't have done any better, and then sold the car very well. So
Wow.
yes, it was a ground effect car. Darren's asking a question: was that a ground effect? Yes, it was.
Yes. It wasn't the first, was it? Because that was 78, wasn't it? Was the
but the thing was, in our rules, you had to run them. I think it was 40 centimeters above the ground, so you couldn't run the sliding skirts that they would have had in period.
Right. Okay.
Okay, and of course we didn't have brilliant. We had Avon tires on them, which were okay, but nothing like as good as what they ran in the period.
Yeah.
And you had to run them a lot higher to get this clearance.
Right. Okay.
But there were still fab things
Super.
to drive. Yeah, absolutely fab. We had a lot of fun, and the back of that, and getting to know Clive very well. I ended up driving 5 different Lotus Formula One cars that belonged to Clive. So I got to drive a Lotus 49 in gold leaf colours.
Beautiful.
The 72, the Emerson Fittipaldi 72, which I drove at Jarama in Spain and Monaco.
Which I think to many people is the JPS Lotus,
It is, so to have actually driven that,
wow,
not just testing it, but racing it. Unfortunately, in true Lotus fashion, we didn't finish any of the races. But it was
very authentic.
I mean, but to drive a car like that around Monaco was fantastic. I mean, I qualified it on the second row, but unfortunately, going up the hill towards Casino Square, all the electrics went, so I didn't actually get to race it.
Oh,
but I'd raced it a month before at Jarama in Spain, so
pretty good.
Pretty good. And that was a pretty cool circuit, actually. It was a bit of a kart circuit, but that kind of suited me. So yeah, it was good.
Just while we're thinking about it,
sorry, after the 72, Lotus 77, so the Japanese Grand Prix winning car of 77. If you remember when Hunt was 4th, Lauda retired, the car that won that was Andretti's 77.
Yes.
And then after that, and then my one, the 87B, and then the Lotus 79, the Andretti World Championship winning 79. How lucky is that, right? I demoed that at Brands Hatch at a Club Lotus event, that was just amazing.
That's like bucket list stuff, isn't it?
That was. You might ask this question later, and I think there's the answer. I think the Lotus 79 was the best car I ever drove. Yeah.
Wow. There's no surprise there. I mean, that is what a car. And I was, as I mentioned before, I had the privilege of speaking with Mario on here, and I asked him. I mean, he's driven NASCAR, IndyCar, he's driven the quarter midgets, he's driven everything, and obviously, whatever Mario Andretti says, you kind of agree with. And I asked him the same question, and he said he gave me an answer for F1 and an answer for IndyCar, and he said of the two, there's no contest. It was the 78.
Well, I never thought I'd have much in common with Mario because he's such a superstar, but I'm glad that we agreed on that. But how I got to drive the 79 was interesting because I was speaking to Chris Dinage, and he said, "Oh, are you going to come down to Brands for the Club Lotus thing? We're going to be showcasing the Lotus 79." I said, "Oh, great. Yeah, well, if I'm not doing anything, I'll come down." And I said, "Hang on, what do you mean showcasing it?" He said, "Well, we've rebuilt it because Mario's coming over to drive the car up the hill at Goodwood. So we're going to have it on display there beforehand." I said, the car needs shaking down, Chris. I said, you can't have the man fly all the way over from America without it actually having been driven, properly. And he said, I think I know where this is leading.
Yeah, that was a very leading question, wasn't it?
And I said, well, 4 or 5 laps, that's all it will take, just to make sure the gauges are working, the gearbox is working, blah, 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 blah. So that's how that came about. Yeah.
Oh, nicely done.
Yeah.
Nicely maneuvered.
Yes, I thought so. Yeah.
Very good. As you say, when you have an opportunity,
that's right.
Make it happen.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Just a very what has Andrew Conley said here? He said, said thanks for the great inside stories from back in the day that you didn't see on the TV or the pages of Autosport. Sean's another of the enthusiastic racing people that we all love to watch back in the day.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks.
Fabulous. That's excellent. And just want to do this very quickly before we nudge ourselves forward. Mac, I don't know your full name, Mac, but you're on YouTube. Thank you very much for tuning in. He says, don't forget you also drove the monstrous Elite 111R.
That's my youngest son. And he raced the Lotus Elise 111R. Yes. And so he was very kind to let his old man have a go in it. Yeah.
Lovely. Well, hello, Matt. Thank you for tuning in. Lovely to have you on board. No, that's terrific. I didn't know that was a family link there. That was a complete curveball for me. So thank you, folks.
You teed it up beautifully.
We love a curveball, genuinely, because this is the fun of doing things live. You get stuff cropping up that you don't expect. Very quickly, Stuart Dent. We've got to put Stuart Dent in here. It says, does Sean remember our encounter in Formula Talbot? This sounds interesting.
No, I do remember our encounter at a hotel outside of Kyalami, Stuart, in 1994, where we had a bit to drink and everything. I don't remember the thing in Talbot. No, I don't actually know, but
Right,
I'm sure you
Stuart,
can refresh me.
Right, Stuart, that is one for the comments. Just give us some details.
Oh, hello, Mandy. Hello.
Yes, Mandy Gravitt. Hello, Mandy. Lovely to see you at Silverstone recently.
99. Oh, 92, not 94. Yeah, I knew he'd know. Yeah.
An encyclopedia.
Yeah.
But yes, Mandy Gravitt. Good evening, Mandy. I do hope you're very, very well. Yes, I mean, I'm very jealous because I loved Lotus back in the day. Just because people often ask me what's on this shelf behind me.
Yeah.
And this is the Ayrton Senna shelf. And that's
the turbo car, yeah.
That's the 98. That is a glorious creation. And just while we're on the subject and we're boring people, got to have that one as well.
Oh, yes. Very nice.
So there we go. Love a bit of Lotus. Absolutely fantastic. Excuse me.
That's all right.
Yes, obviously involved with Lotus. And as you say, it's lovely to come full circle with you and Clive and your father and Colin. And just on the subject of that, I guess you'll remember what you were doing when you heard that Colin had very sadly passed. Because it came to, from what I can gather, it came as a huge shock to everyone. I remember Nigel Mansell saying that when Colin Chapman died, it was like losing his father. Just wondering if you had any memories of the great man himself.
No, not really. I can remember being with my parents and flying up to their place in Norfolk.
Mm-hmm.
But no, not really. No, I can't say I can add any sort of stories or anything to that. But obviously, we got to when we were doing the historic Formula One thing, or Thoroughbred Grand Prix, as they called it. The FIA called it. Not so catchy, is it really? But anyway, TGP. When we were obviously got to spend a lot of time with Clive. Oh, there we go. Stuart says, you lapped me at Mallory and didn't acknowledge I'd moved over for you. Yeah, I can't argue with that, really, can I? It's a matter of fact, you know. So,
and it's there in black and white forever.
In black, so it must be right. It must be right.
Yes.
Yeah,
and it's on the internet, so obviously it's right.
Yeah. So I got to spend a lot of time with Clive in 94 and 95, and it was just great. I mean, we had such a good time. Classic Team Lotus has gone on to be, you know, a fantastic thing, and they've got clients all over the world now, and they're rebuilding all these lovely cars and maintaining them all. And Clive's very passionate about keeping the whole Lotus thing going, and more power to him, really. He's done a great job of keeping the whole Lotus, the history of Lotus, going.
Yeah, definitely, and it's a huge part of not just motor racing history, of automotive history, and it's lovely that it's all back. Just on that subject, I know we had like Martin Donnelly lives up that way, and he still has been involved with Lotus until recently. I believe he's
yeah.
And he was at Brands Hatch on Sunday for the touring cars. I bumped into him very briefly, and he's well, so that's good. That's good.
Yeah. Well, I mean, listen, every day's a bonus for Martin, isn't it? After you saw that horrific shunt he had. One driver. Yeah.
I actually put something out on the hard compound on the anniversary of the shunt, and I said, "Look, caution! There's a couple of accident images here." I didn't, and I blurred them out and all that kind of thing. And I messaged Martin beforehand saying, "Look, I'd like to put this out if it's okay with you. I don't want to remind you of something horrible." And he said, "Well, one, I don't have any memory of it.
Yeah.
And two, this anniversary of the crash, every day feels like another second birthday for me."
I'm sure.
And I thought, what a wonderful way to put it. And he basically said, "Put anything you like out, because the more people know about it, it makes me look tough." So, absolute trooper and a lovely chap.
Yeah, he is. He is. And very lucky. I mean, as you say, every day for him is a birthday or a bonus, isn't it? Really? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So we finished with Classic Team Lotus at the end of '95 in terms of racing, and I didn't do anything in '96. When I finished in Brno, I thought that was going to be it. And then a guy that was also involved in historic Formula One, a guy called Robin Mortimer, who had a Ferrari dealership called Mortimer Houghton Turner down in Gloucestershire, I think it was. And he and Bob Houghton were running the British side of the Ferrari 355 Challenge. When I say the British side, there wasn't a British series then, but there was this European series, and they ran all the cars that were being run from Britain. And he said, "Why don't you come and drive one of these?" He said, "I think you'd love it." Anyway, so went down. Of course, he knew exactly what he was doing. I did love it, and we ended up buying one. In fact, I've still got it. Actually, I bought this Challenge car in 1997. I've still got it, and I think it must be the only one-owner 355 Challenge car, right-hand drive in existence. Not that I'm trying to sell it by plugging it like this. You understand?
Of course not. No.
Who
would want a car?
Yeah, and that was great fun as well. So race at great circuits. One of the highlights was at the end of every year, Ferrari used to get all of the people running 355s because there was championships. We did what was called the West European Championship. There was one for Germany and Austria. There was one just for Italy. There was one for North America. There was one for South America, which was mainly Venezuela and Colombia. Those cars tended to follow the white lines around the edge of the circuit a lot. Can't think why, but anyway. And at the end of each year, Ferrari used to get everyone together for what they used to call the World Finals. You're still thinking about that?
Self-driving cars.
Colombia. Yeah. Anyway, and in '97, it was held in Sicily at a circuit called Enna Pergusa, which used to be a big thing in the 60s and 70s for Formula 2 cars.
It was around the lake.
Around the mosquito-infested lake. That's right.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. But 1997 was a significant year in Ferrari's history because that was the 50th anniversary of Ferrari. So what Ferrari did, they decided to make this a massive event. So they took the Formula One team down to Sicily, which had never happened before. And Michael Schumacher, Eddie Irvine, and Luca de Montezemolo arrived at the circuit on a helicopter that landed on the pit straight. I mean, by the way, every Sicilian that could walk that day was at Enna, right? And they were around the circuit, digging under the circuit, hanging onto trees, clinging onto billboards, whatever they could to be there, right? And when this helicopter landed and they came out, it was like the Pope had suddenly arrived, right? I mean, it was mayhem. And there was, I think there was 120 355 cars there that turned up for this world final.
Wow.
Think about that, right?
What a sight that must have been.
It was staggering.
Wow.
And we did that. I think I finished, I can't remember, 5th or 4th in the championship, something like that. But we went to some great circuits, and the hospitality, because it was Ferrari, was just awesome. And I did this, stayed in the series for '98, and again the world final, another massive event. That was held at Imola. By this time, we'd realised that although these 355 challenge cars were all supposed to be equal, they were all equal outside of Italy. If you were in the Italian series, slightly different story. Now, this may come as a big surprise to people talking about Italians, that they might go slightly beyond the rules, but there we are. That's what. And to give you some idea, I think in the top 10 in the final, 8 of the cars were from the Italian series. So. Right. And I remember in one of the heats, I'd had a big ding dong with a bunch of people, and it was great fun. And one of the guys in this thing, he was unbelievably quick in a straight line, hopeless through the corners. And when we came to the end of the race, I thought I've got to go over and just say hello and say what great fun it was and blah blah blah. And this geriatric got out the car, and I felt so deflated because I thought, I've had this ding dong with this guy, and he must have been about 75 or something. But he must have had about another 50 horsepower than anyone else. But anyway, I'll tell you another thing that happened there that weekend. Robin Mortimer came over to me and he said, "Sean, how do you fancy having some extra sponsorship for this weekend?" And I said, "Well, sounds good to me." I said, "What's the story?" He said, "I've met this guy in the paddock, and he's got to place some Italian sponsors on a car, but it can't be an Italian car. He's got to be seen by the Italian tax authorities to be having some overseas involvement." I said, "Well, I'm sure we can accommodate that,
yes.
Robin. I'm sure we can." And anyway, so I ended up with this car you've never seen a car with so many different sponsors' names on it. Like, so I had no idea. We had about 10 different Italian sponsors' names on the car. And I think Robin gave me, I can't remember, but let's say he gave us about €3,000 or it would have been lira. Was it lira then? Maybe it was euros. I can't. 1998. Would that have been euros? Don't know.
Pre-Euro, I think.
Yeah, it might have been.
Yeah.
Anyway, how much Robin kept, I've no idea. But anyway, we were very pleased because I happened to pay for some hotel bills and restaurants and all that sort of thing. So that was all very good. So
Lovely.
and that was that really. And then after that, I didn't do anything in '99. Sorry, in 99 until John Morrison, who I'd raced with years earlier, phoned me up for the last round of the British GT Championship and said, "What are you doing this weekend?" And I said, "Not a lot." Why? And he said, "Well, we've had a falling out with they were running 2 Porsche 911 GT1s in the British GT Championship. And we've had a falling out with one of the drivers in the second car. Would you like to come and do it?" And I said, "Yeah, not much, yeah." But I said, "When can we go testing?" He said, "There's no testing. It's straight in, qualifying and the race." I said, "Okay, yeah, no problem." My introduction to it was damp track on slicks, and the turbo wastegate was sticking, so it was either all on or all off. That was my introduction to a car with 640 horsepower, or whatever it was. Anyway, I managed to not destroy it, which was a bit of an achievement in those conditions.
Yeah.
But as it dried out, and I got quicker and quicker in the thing, and ended up doing a really good time in it, I had a bit of a moment at Luffield 1 in front of the BRDC grandstand where I decided to really squirt the loud pedal a little bit earlier than normal, and I had this monster spin. I didn't really think too much of it. Managed to stop it hitting the barrier and all that, and got back to the pits, and the mechanics came over, told them what had happened, everything else. About 5 minutes later, this tyre technician came over, and I can't remember if they were Dunlops or Michelins or whatever. And he came over and he said, "Sean, you're the driver of this car, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "I'd just like to shake your hand." And I said, "Oh, very nice." I said, "Do you mind me asking why?" He said, "I've never met anyone who can flat spot all 4 tyres." So, and someone said, "Oh, that's going to be very expensive." I said, "Not as expensive as against or compared against it hitting the barriers. So 4 flat spotted tyres is cheap." So once I'd actually explained it like that, I wasn't in so much trouble.
They were kind of happy with it more.
Yeah.
Well, happier.
Yeah. But that was a fantastic car, actually, a 911 GT1, absolutely fantastic. So I drove it just the once. We finished second. That's my one and only British, or any, not just British, but any GT race. So it's a pretty cool car to have. If you're going to do one GT race, it's not a bad car to do it in.
Yeah.
And that was kind of it, really. And then after that, it was all about going historic racing and getting involved in all sorts of stuff. Yeah.
And this is something that I just like to run through. I mean, also, I'm keeping on the time. I don't want to keep everyone too late. But, I mean, you must have driven some terrific cars. I mean, as I said, we've had a chat off air about some bits and pieces, but we didn't really talk much about this. So I'm interested in sort of hearing some of your sort of favourite cars you've driven on the historic side, really.
Well, the Lotus 79 would be, obviously number one. March 782. I had a great. This is very funny, actually. I loved the Formula 2 March car from 1978, and that was the car. There was Chevron was quick, but really the car I had was a March. Anyway, always wanted to have one. Found one that was for sale in Paris. And I contacted Fluxy and I said, "Look, why don't you come?" Because he'd mechanicked on one of these cars going back to whenever. So I thought he'd be a good guy to come over with me and have a look at the car. So I said, "Well, we'll go and have a nice lunch afterwards or something like that. We'll just go over there and back in the day and have a nice lunch." So we were given these directions to find this car. We had to go around the Périphérique in Paris, come off at a certain, area. And I think I know who that is. Yes, the Crescent Roar. I think he's referring to.
3-litre Capri. Okay.
Yeah, I had a thing, and I think this is a friend of mine called John Robinson, and we both had 3-litre Capris, and he ended up having 3 of them. I had 4 of them, or something like that. So yeah, we were a bit besotted by them.
Super.
Yeah. Oh yes. So there we are, going around the Periphery. Have to come up at a certain, a port, as they call them. There we are. It is. Yeah. And And we were given these instructions to go to this multi-story car park. And I thought, this can't be right. We're going to look at a racing car in a multi-story car park. Anyway, we had to go to the very top. And they said, when you get there, just look for this box. So we get there, we look for this box, and there's a button on it. We hit the button, and this panel of this multi-story car park wall opens up. It's all very sort of Bond villain-esque, right? And we thought, what the fuck's going on here? And we walked in, and there was this March Formula 2 car. We didn't even look at it, right? We saw it there. What we saw behind it was what really caught our eyes. It was a complete cornucopia of unbelievable Porsches. The first one being a Porsche 917 in white. And we said, this hasn't got any markings on this car. Whose car was this? Who raced it? And this is a collector. And he said, and the story was he was just storing this March car. It wasn't his. He was storing it on behalf of a friend of his. And this guy said, this car was never raced in period. I said, this is a 917 that's never been raced in period. And he said, no. I said, what are all these big crates around it? He said, oh, spare engines, gearboxes. I mean, we couldn't believe it. And then we looked behind that, and there was Porsche 906s and 910s and more boxes behind them. And I mean, it was just... Anyway, it was the most fantastic thing. It was this Aladdin's cave of cars that you would never, ever think existed like that. And the story was, this 917 was a Gulf car, spare car, but was never used. And at the end of the year, it was sold to this collector, I think, or a friend of this collector, and they decided it was never going to be raced. So
wow,
it stayed in storage.
That's incredible. And for anyone who doesn't know the 917, if you've seen the proper Le Mans film, the first one with Steve McQueen, it's the Golf Porsche from there. Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So it was. Yeah. Anyway, so we ended up buying the Formula 2 car. And we had a very good lunch just off the Champs-Élysées, as I promised Fluxy that we would have, and we managed to get back home in time. Oh, talking about having a good lunch in France, there was a time coming back from a race at Manicourt with Clive Chapman, and Clive had lost his passport. But I can tell you here and now that I'm a people smuggler, because I covered Clive in coats and anoraks and all that sort of stuff, and put him in the footwell behind the driver and passenger seat. And we smuggled Clive through.
There you go. That is an exclusive. Clive Chapman has been smuggled out of France.
Yes. Yeah.
That's amazing.
So March 782, I drove that. I drove various. So I spent 10 years racing a Lotus 26R, which was like an homage to one of my father's cars. It was a proper 26R, but we made it look exactly the same as one of my father's cars. Not that it was one of his cars, but we made it look exactly the same. And various sports cars. What else? I ended up buying. There's a strange thing. So I had this March 782, which I told you about. I was then offered the sister car to that. So the car that I had was raced by Jean-Pierre Jarier in the day, and it was run by a French team called Mont Blanc Racing Services, MRS, and he was the main driver. And he was paid to drive it, and there was a paid driver who brought money into the team. And I ended up buying that car, but I didn't know at the time they were both from the same team. And I ended up buying a spare March BMW Formula 2 engine from an engine builder in France. And when we were there, this old boy came along and he said, "What are these engines going in?" I said, "Oh, March 782s." He said, "Which ones?" And I said, "MRS cars." He said, "Oh, which chassis number? Because is it chassis 16 or chassis 19? And I said, "Well, it could be either. I haven't decided yet." He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, I've got both of them." And I said, "Why do you ask?" He said, "I was Jean-Pierre Jarier's mechanic."
Wow.
So really cool. So we ended up chatting. And he said, "Do you know how you can tell the difference? Just a simple little thing to look at the rear end as to which one is 16 and 19 without looking at the chassis plate." And I said, "I'm not too sure, but I'm sure you're the man to tell us." And he told us. And when we got back, we looked at the cars. And and they were still exactly the same as when he looked after them in 1978. This one little difference on the back end. Yeah. So
wow,
that was a nice story. Yeah.
That's lovely. That's very cool. And obviously Jean-Pierre Jarier, in my mind, one of the most underrated F1 drivers ever.
You're absolutely right. And when he got to sit in a proper car, when he stood in the Lotus and drove at Watkins Glen and was it Mossport, I think, or somewhere like that? I can't remember.
Canada, yeah, Mossport.
And he was stunning. And he should have been offered the drive for the following year, but he wasn't. Do you remember what his nickname was?
No.
So he was known as Jumper, right? And if Stuart's still listening, I don't know if Stuart knows this, but he was known as Jumper. But
Right.
not many people know, because not many people know why he was called Jumper, right? I didn't know it. I happened to be having dinner. Oh, Montreal. Thank you, Stuart.
Montreal.
Well done. I happened to be having dinner at Spa for the historic Spa 6 hours race one year. And the guy I was very pally with was a guy called Chris Marshall, who used to be James Hunt's manager in the early days of Hunt's career in Formula 3 and early days of Formula 1. And he can tell a story or two, obviously. We were talking about, and he said, "Oh, have you still got your March 782 car, Sean?" And I said, "Yeah, I have." He said, "It's Jumper's car, isn't it?" And I said, "Yeah, it is." I said, "I've often wondered, why is he called Jumper?" And he said, "I can tell you." And I said, "Well, how can you tell me?" He said, "Because I gave him that name." And I said, "Okay, so why did you call him Jumper?" He said, "He's a frog, isn't he?" He said, "What do frogs do?" There we
I
are.
thought there was going to be some elaborate story
No,
about
very
a
simple.
hotel and jumping over fences or something.
What
But
do frogs do? They jump. Yeah, so that was his nickname. Yeah. Anyway,
fair enough.
what else? I can't remember now. Oh, yeah, all sorts of stuff, really. So
Oh,
I can
brilliant.
tell you what the worst car that I ever drove was, if you'd like to know.
Always.
Right. So I did a Thunder Sports race, and there was when Ginetta, not as it is now, was owned by the Walklet family. They decided to put would you like to know the true story of the jumper? I think that is the true story, Stuart. But anyway,
Oh,
he's
the
gonna
plot
say something different now.
The plot thickens.
Anyway, where was I? It's interrupted my flow. I thought only my doctor could do that. Anyway, what was I going to say? Where was I? Lost track.
We were saying, where were we?
Yeah, pay attention.
The worst car.
Yeah, worst car. Right.
Yes.
So the Ginetta had created a Sports 2000 car, which was hopelessly unsuccessful. And they decided to compound how hopeless it was by putting a Mazda rotary engine in it for Thunder Sports. And the guy who was paying for it all, it had Hawaiian Tropic on the car. I don't know how much money they were putting into it, if any at all, but that kind of looked nice. But that was the only thing that looked nice about it. And it drove. It was the worst driving car I've ever driven because the wheelbase was all wrong. And of course, no one told me until I went out in it that driving a rotary engine, there's no engine braking with it, and I didn't know that. No one had told me. And the first two corners, I mean, how I didn't demolish the thing, I've no idea, because I was braking where you think you would normally brake. And of course, there's no engine braking. So, but the good thing was, I was absolutely crapping myself that I was going to have to race this for half an hour, 40 minutes, or whatever it was. And the good news was, the guy who was paying for it all demolished it. And the car came back into the pits and they said, "Don't worry, Sean, we can get it fixed." I said, "I'd really prefer it if you didn't." But that was without doubt the worst car ever. Yeah, so you've had that, and you've had the worst. Yeah,
That's pretty bad if you turn down a rebuild.
yeah. Well, I mean, they may have been able to do it in time, but it was just. I said no. I'd rather you didn't. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Just want to say a very quick hello to Mr. John Cavill, another expert on the world of F1 who's been involved with it, probably on a similar level to Stuart Den. So, evening, John. Appreciate your support recently. Good stuff. Right, okay, Stuart Den. Here we go. Mike Hurd, former editor of Autosport and son of Robin, couldn't pronounce Jean-Pierre when he was a small boy, and the best he could do was Jumper.
Yeah, I don't think that's right, Stuart.
This was in 1973 when
Well, I'll tell you why. Because apart from managing James Hunt in the early days, he also managed Jean-Pierre Jarier.
I like both tales. So,
Let's go with both.
Whichever it is, or both.
Yeah,
it's fantastic. Thank you, Stuart. Lovely.
Yeah.
Right, very quickly, we mentioned earlier on that you and your company are involved with bikes. Now, again, anyone who knows me knows that I love my bike racing as well. I don't cover it as much on the hard compound as I'd like to, but I love bike racing, and I am most jealous that you're involved with bikes with your business. Just very quickly, how did all that come about, and what?
Well, it all started, as I mentioned earlier. I bumped into Stuart at the Autosport show in 2008 or something like that, And Stuart happened to say, "Do you like bike racing?" I said, "Yeah, you know what? I'm really excited by bike racing these days. And I actually watch more of it than I do Formula One these days because it's just so exciting. There's so much overtaking, and they're gladiators, really."
Yeah.
And he said, "Well, there's this young lad called Chaz Davis who's he's really quick. He's a lovely boy, and any help you could give him would be great." Anyway, cut long story short, we ended up getting involved with him. He was racing for the Aprilia Germany team. I can't remember if it was 125s or 250s now. No doubt Stuart's going to tell us. So what would we do without Stuart this evening? I don't know. Anyway, so yeah. Anyway, cut long story short, we were involved with that. Chaz then went over to it. That didn't work out terribly well for him. He then went over to America. That worked out really well for him. And was the first man since Barry Sheen to win at Daytona on a bike. British guy, since Barry Sheen. Then Chaz was invited to come back over to get involved in the World Supersport Championship. I think it was in 2009 or 10. And the first event he did was at Imola, and he finished fourth in it. So the team offered him a ride for the following year. We got back in touch with him, and we became a personal sponsor of him in about 2011. We won the World Supersport Championship in 2011, and that was great. Cut long story short, as the years went by, and the business was growing, and our overseas business was growing a lot, we really wanted to break into the Italian aftermarket. And we needed to have a reason and an excuse for people to listen to us. And so we thought, let's get involved with the Ducati factory.
Right.
So I spoke to Chaz, and he was, by that time, I had already been a works rider for Ducati for 3 or 4 years, having a FAI on the side of his, overalls and all that sort of thing. And I said, I need to speak to the powers that be at Ducati. I think I've met them anyway, but if you could set up a meeting for me, I'd really appreciate it. Anyway, met them, did a fantastic deal, pretty good money that we were giving them. And what part of the deal I did was that we had 5 factory visits for 20 people each time. That's 100 people that we could entertain. Plus, there was 2 rounds in Italy for the World Superbike Championship. We could take 20 guests, be part of the team. So that's 40 guests. So we could entertain 140 guests. And of course, in Italy, Ducati is like the Ferrari of the bike world, as you know, Rich, right? And as soon as we said, we're FAI, and by the way, it turns out that FAI as FI, in Italy we were known as FI, is an Italian imperative, meaning do it. So that was kind of handy. So we said, we're FI, we'd like to do some business with you, but you don't know us. Come and meet us. I'll tell you what, come and meet us at the Ducati factory, and we'll tell you more about us. And they said, what do you mean the Ducati factory? And we said, well, oh yeah, sorry, we haven't told you. We're one of their sponsors, and we'd like to entertain you there, and you can get to know more about us. We didn't have anyone say no to that. And really? He actually went from being a nothing market to our second biggest overseas market in 3 years.
Wow!
By being involved with Ducati. So sponsorship, when done correctly, can work really well. But we had a lot of fun with it, and the motorbike world is so good. Everyone's so welcoming. Yeah. I mean, not this weekend, the weekend after, we're going down to Jerez for the last round of the World Superbike Championship.
Lovely.
And we're going down there as guests of Yamaha, even though we were sponsors of Ducati. Okay. Paul Denning, who runs the Yamaha team, was every year trying to get me to switch from Ducati to Yamaha. We ended up becoming good friends. In fact, we had dinner with him 2 weeks ago. And so we're going down to meet up with all the people that we were involved with for like 3 or 4 years in the World Superbike world. And it's just great. And it's great racing. And I watch more bike racing now than I do car racing, if I'm being really honest. Be it Superbikes or MotoGP, I don't mind. Yeah,
because it is fantastic. And folks, if you ever see any bike stuff on the Hard Compound, do give it a read, give it a look, and look into it. Because if you like your close racing and your skillful racing, there's nothing better. It is. I mean, it's incredible.
The best way of explaining it is that the difference between car drivers and bike riders is that bike riders know they're going to hurt themselves, but they just don't know when.
Yeah. Or come out badly.
Fairly soon, and that's the difference. They know they're going to hurt themselves, but they just don't know when. And every weekend they know they're going to fall off their bike at least once.
Yeah.
Right. And if you think about it, going into driving these things at 320 kilometers an hour, and they go into a corner and something goes wrong, and they come off it at like 180 kilometers an hour, and they're flying through the air.
Yeah.
Right. It's remarkable that they get up, dust themselves down, and say, right, come on, let's get going.
Right, next. Did you see? Just put me in mind. I think it was 2 or 3 years ago. I believe it might have been Maverick Vinales. I think, and he was doing 100 and something up towards 200
Yeah.
miles an hour. I forget where it was, so I'm sure someone will correct me. And he had brake failure. He was doing about 180, and he did that.
Yeah,
And
and I think that might have been at the end of the pit straight at Jerez.
I think it was Jerez actually, and he basically he had to say, "Well, I better get off then,"
Yeah,
and he just hopped off, and the
yeah,
bike went straight into the airbags at the end. And he sort of got up, dusted himself down, checked everything was facing the right way, and walked back to the pit.
yeah. But that,
And you think, oh,
but to
in
make
your
that
mind, you're doing
split-second
180
decision,
miles an hour, and you're
yeah,
thinking,
that
I'm gonna,
split-second decision of just jumping off a bike whilst it's doing 180 kilometers an hour. I mean, it's a different world.
it's astonishing.
It is. Yeah.
And you think, at what part in your brain do you think, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. I have to do this. All right, let's go. And it's incredible.
Yeah.
You just mentioned you're going to Jerez with Yamaha. Would that be the Pata team?
It is.
So
Yeah, that's right.
it
Yeah,
would be Top Rack's last. Top
it
Rack's
is.
last
That
race.
will be Top Rack's last race for them. Yeah.
'Cause he's
Yeah,
off to
before
BMW,
Mr. Ray
isn't
comes
he?
in there. Yeah.
And they got Johnny Ray. That's going to be interesting, isn't it? Coming
It
from
will.
Kawasaki.
It will.
Seeing what that's all about. Yes.
Yes. Big bucks there.
Absolutely. Yes. We're not talking £5 notes, are we? That's
No.
good stuff. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. So yeah, looking forward to that. But yeah, great stuff with the bikes. Always have to shoehorn the bikes in.
Well, why not? I mean, I think more and more car people are aware of just how exciting bike racing is, and how how demanding and challenging it is for these guys to do what they do at this speed. And the great thing is on bikes is you see absolutely everything they're doing. I can remember Chaz saying to me one day, "Oh, they were fiddling around with the tank." I said, "What are they doing?" They said, "We're going to move the tank. It's like 1 mil or 2 mil." And I said, "Really? What difference is that going to make?" He said, "You can't believe it, Sean. That can transform a bike." So all these little things and trying to position themselves in a certain way at a certain time can affect the handling so much. Now you and I watch it, and you can see them sometimes, really struggling and wrestling with these things.
Yeah.
But actually, it kind of looks a bit sort of animalistic, and sometimes maybe it is. But sometimes they're just trying to get in exactly the right position where they know that will help it turn a bit better, or put the power down a little bit better. It's quite incredible.
And it's down to the millimeter.
It
And
is.
I've said this before, and I will say it again and again and again. I was at Thruxton last year on the that heat wave that we had last week, and it was about I don't know, it was about 55 degrees, or it felt like it, at Thruxton on the banking at the complex. I was there for the British Superbike Championship, and it was the OMG Racing guy, the champion-elect Brad Ray, and the two McCams Yamahas of Taron McKenzie and Jason O'Halloran. And they just rode off into the distance, which sounds boring, but the three of them, the lead changed hands about a dozen times a lap.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Around Thruxton. And it races 2 and 3 on the Sunday for that weekend. If you want to find them on the internet somewhere, folks, do so, because it is the most astonishing racing you will ever see, especially around Thruxton. It's so fast, and they are 3 millimeters apart from each other's back wheels. Complete trust, complete respect, and it's phenomenal.
I totally agree. Totally agree. You don't have to convince me. I'm a bike convert. Yeah,
it's so good. And folks, if you're free this weekend, get down to Brands Hatch. It's the finale of the BSB season, and yes, Tommy Bridewell and Glenn Irwin looks like one of them is going to win it. It's going to be fantastic. And we need to quick mention, while we're talking about bikes, we need to give a quick shout out to Paul Bird, who very sadly passed away recently. The owner of PBM. So yeah, thoughts and love to everyone at PBM.
Yeah.
No, brilliant, fantastic. Right, what we need to do. Oh, hang on, what we got here? Bike racers and rally drivers have bigger yes than anyone else. Absolutely true.
Yeah.
Absolutely true. Very quickly, Diff and Evans. When bike riders come off their bikes, they shrug themselves down and walk away like nothing's happened. Look at the football players. Yes, they sort of twist an ankle, and it's like the end. Yeah, the world's going to end. Yes, making a fool of themselves. No comment. Right. Oh goodness me, we've got all kinds of comments coming in. Yeah, BSB is a great last time out. Last year was at Brands Hatch. Scott Redding won it. Yeah, Scott Redding, who signed a good deal this year, so that's all rather good. And we're not even going to get into the TT races because they're just ridiculous.
Oh, they're from another
Incredible
planet.
race.
Yeah.
Oh, it's terrifying. Right, we'd like to wind down with some fun questions. We've already answered a couple, the best and worst cars, which is fair enough. Did you have a favourite driver when you were growing up? Obviously, you grew up around motorsport. Did you have a favourite, or was it just
No, it's not. I suppose the ultimate really would have been Villeneuve and Gilles Villeneuve, not Jacques Villeneuve. I would have to say, because he never gave up. He had unbelievable talent. I was at Silverstone the first time he drove a Formula One car, and that was at Silverstone in a McLaren M23 when that was the old car.
Yes.
And
was that his only drive for McLaren? Right? Wasn't it? I think that was his only drive for McLaren. I think, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I mean, why they didn't sign him, well, I suppose it was Ferrari came along and made him a better offer. But yes. I mean, he was sensational. I mean, for his first race there, I think he was running as high as 7th in the old car. And it was incredible. But yeah, I mean, he did things with those Ferraris when the Ferraris were not very competitive. He did things with them which no one else could do, really. So that would be my standout one, I think. Yeah,
fantastic. Just really quick, this is one that I've thrown in from earlier. Darren Morley asked, who were your rated and unrated drivers during your time in the BTCC? Oh, that's a stinker, isn't it?
That is a stinker. Yeah, I don't. Well, as there's a few of them on here tonight, I'm not too sure I should answer that for diplomatic reasons. I think. Can I swerve that one?
Yes, we'll just say the guys that Jerry and Carl and.
I can tell you who's my favourite driver who's racing now.
Oh yeah,
Shane van Gisbergen.
Oh, good shout! Yes.
Yeah.
I put a thing out earlier on this year saying he is probably the hottest property in world motorsport, and people will be like, "Who? What?
No, it doesn't matter if he in the V8s, in the Porsche Carrera Cup that he sometimes races.
Yeah.
How many years was it since someone had, as a rookie, won a NASCAR race? I mean, admit it was a street race. It was in the wet, but it doesn't matter. Jenson Button was
but it was well marketed, and he did it. And
I mean, Jenson Button was in that race and was about 15th or something, and Van Gisbergen went there and won it.
I think was it Kamui Kobayashi was in the race as well. I think was the other guest racer there, and Shane van Gisbergen, amazing. He's doing. I think he's going to do in NASCAR what Scott McLaughlin's doing in IndyCar from the Kiwis. But it's brilliant, and he's just won Bathurst again, and
it's fantastic. I mean, he is a mega talent. Yeah,
absolutely superb, and NASCAR lucky to be having him next year.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, that's a great shout. There was one more. Okay, yes. Oh, I'm sorry, this is a favourite driver. Do you follow the BTCC now, or is there anything else that you follow closely apart from?
I don't follow it much now, to be honest. I'm like, no, I don't. Well, that is not completely true. So last year, because my son Mackenzie, or Mac as we call him, is doing the Ginetta GT Academy, and one of the races last year was on the BTCC program. So obviously I spent a load of time catching up with Alan, but I also spent a lot of time catching up with Marvin Humphreys, who runs the Accelerate team of 4 cars last year. I don't know how many cars they got this year.
4 again,
yeah, and spent quite a bit of time with Tom Ingram, who's a really, really nice guy. So no, I really enjoyed it, and I thought it was great, and it looked fabulous, and there was loads of sponsors around in it, and that was all great, and a good crowd and all that sort of thing. So it's obviously going well. But no, I don't really. I mean, as I said earlier, I don't watch an awful lot of car racing, but I do watch an awful lot of bike racing.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah. So
sure. And just very quick, while we're there, and I was there on Sunday. Huge shout out to Ash Sutton, the champion this year. What a job he did this year in the BTCC. Incredible, different class.
He's driving one of the Ford Focuses, isn't he?
Yes.
Yeah.
One of the Napa racing ones, and they look good as well, which helps. I mean, that helps everyone, doesn't it?
Oh yeah.
Right, very quickly, what have we got here? Carl Jones. This is going to be an in joke. When are we going? He says, Sean, when are we going to wear the otter ties again? I'm intrigued.
Oh, well, that's a good one. So, okay, I'll tell you the full story. So, when Will Hoy passed away, there was a memorial service held for him, and it was unbelievably well attended. And it was in sort of West London. I can't remember exactly where, but it's West London. And afterwards, myself, Chris Marshall, who I mentioned earlier, Fluxy, and another friend of ours, a guy called Colin Paul, who sadly passed away a few years ago. We decided to go and have lunch together. And on the back of that, I then started to organise sort of regular lunches for sort of friends of ours that were involved in racing. We had all sorts of people come along over the years. And I decided to call ourselves the Otters, right? Which stood for Old Tossers That Enjoy Racing Still, right? So we were the Otters. And we used to make a reservation in the restaurants under the name The Otters. And I decided to get a club tie made, which is what Carl is referring to. And it was a disgustingly sort of burgundy coloured tie with this. I got this cartoon otter on the tie, about this big. And he had an old sort of open-face racing helmet on. And he had a gap in his front teeth like the old English actor Terry Thomas.
Oh, yes.
And he had a flute of champagne in one hand and a big lardy-dar cigar in the other. And that was our sort of club symbol, right?
Brilliant.
And yeah, we had a lot of fun doing that. We had all sorts of people coming into it, people that were in touring cars. We had a Le Mans winner come. Andy Wallace came and joined us one day, became the rubber man by the end of the afternoon. I've never seen anyone get so wobbly with a few glasses of wine inside him. Paddy Hopkirk came, and all sorts of people. And it was anyway. So that's what Carl is referring to about the Otters ties. Yeah,
lovely. Oh, I kind of want to see those now. Terrific. Just very quickly, going back to Shane van Gisbergen, and Andrew Bishop's just mentioned something. I'm going to do a shameless plug here. Shane van Gisbergen, Kiwi racer, New Zealander. We've got Greg Murphy coming on Sunday night, which is going to be lovely. Speaking to Greg, 4-time Bathurst winner. So do not miss that, folks. What have we got here? Very, very quickly. What have we got here? Kales Cole. She's been on for a chat a couple of years ago. She's a young girl from Northern Ireland. And she said, if you like watching bikes, you have to come and watch the F1000. They're bike-engined single-seaters.
Yeah, I've actually seen those, and they look quite tasty, actually.
Brilliant. And Kale's, she's gone from karting into there, and she's doing brilliant things. Sorry, the engine blew last time, Kales. That was an awful thing to see. But what a great season. So go and give Kales Cole a follow on social media. She is going places. Absolutely.
Okay, good to know.
There you are. It's a plug for you, Kales. Check in the post. Joking. Right. 2 final questions, because we're 2 hours now, which has been great. Is there anything that you'd love to have had a go at, whether it be NASCAR or IndyCar or Supercar?
Yeah, easy to answer. NASCAR. And so I've always loved NASCAR, and I've been to 3 races. I've been to the Brickyard at Indianapolis. I've been to Daytona for the 500, but the best of all, and if you want to go and see one NASCAR race, go and see it in the real proper NASCAR country in Alabama, Talladega.
Talladega's the one, yeah.
That's the one, and it's full of all these amazing, Southern characters, and they really do hoot and holler and all that sort of thing. And within literally about 2, I went there with, in fact, the guy who came on earlier on here, a friend of mine called John Robinson. I mentioned him earlier. We went to Talladega, and everyone wants to talk to you there. And once they realised that we not only were we from out of state, but we were out from another country, they were completely mystified. And they started giving us beers and everything else and all that sort of thing. And then they realised that we knew a bit about NASCAR, so that was great. But yeah, and then NASCAR, I think that's just. And some people say, oh well, it's just roundy stuff. Well, you know what? I'll tell you something. When I went to Daytona, I saw the 2 qualifying races, and this kind of sums up the mentality there. There was this monster shunt. It's a slight kink at Daytona, right? It's all flat out. There's a slight kink on the main straight, and 3 into 2 didn't go there. 1 car in the middle flipped up, bounced down the road, burst into flames, hit the wall on the side. This car comes spinning out, upside down, flames belching off it. Crowd go. And this guy gets out, I can't remember who it was, gets out the car. And this is how to go racing and to try and salvage something that's a pretty shitty situation. As he gets out the car, with one hand, he's beating the flames off his arse, but with the other hand, he's waving to the crowd. And there was a guy next to me wearing a Caterpillar baseball cap that he must have had for about 50 years or something. And he just turned around at me when he saw this guy doing this, and he said, "Yep, he's a good old boy." And that summed it up for me. That was NASCAR.
That's a textbook dismount.
Yeah. Yes.
Brilliant. Very quickly, I don't know if anyone saw. People have seen the film about NASCAR, the Ballad of Ricky Bobby, and all that kind of thing. And they had was it Wonderloaf and Old Spice were the two sponsors on the cars. One of the teams, I've completely forgotten which one it was. They at Talladega the other week, they recreated those two cars, and obviously they must have sold more merchandise on that weekend than they've done in the past 3 years, which is fantastic.
Yeah, amazing.
There's a comment here from Oliver Taylor, which I do have to explain. We had Jason Plato on here, and he'd always fancied going on to do some NASCAR, and he went out to the States. He bumped into the late, great Dale Earnhardt, the legend. And he's introduced, and he said, "Oh, I do the touring cars." And Dale Earnhardt said, "Oh, it's those little itty bitty cars you drive." Yeah, okay, no problem. And he said, "Oh, are you here on vacation?" And he goes, "Oh no, I'm looking at getting into NASCAR for next year." And you just pardon my language here. Dale Earnhardt had shades on, and he moved them down to the end of his nose and said, "Boy, this ain't for puppies. This is where the big dogs piss." And apparently, Jason Plato just dissolved into laughter.
Yeah.
But yes, it's absolutely not just going around in circles. It's incredible. Great stuff.
I love it. Yeah, fantastic fun.
Okay, final question. This is where I have to take a deep breath because I'm going to reel off a few names. You've raced against a lot of great drivers. From deep breath. We've got like Tiff Needell, Martin Donnelly, Maurizio Sala, Julian Bailey, Mo Gouge. I mean, Tony Trimmer, Mike Wilds, former guest on here as well. Chris Hodgetts, Fluxy, Tony Land, Frankie, Jeff Allen, Jeremy Rossiter, my goodness, Louise Aitken Walker, Lawrence Bristow, Jerry, if you're still watching, you've made the list. Kelvin Burt, Carl Jones, you've made the list as well. Rob Gravitt, Cleland, Sittner, Will Hoy, Tim Harvey, Menu, Neil, Sopo, Rouse, Marshall, Hill, Prost. I mean, lots and lots of very, very, very good drivers. Is there any of those or another one who you think he was different or special or hard to beat or a pain or?
Yeah, well, I tell you one person, I think Kenny Aitchison mentioned him when you had him on a few months ago. There was an Irish driver who I always thought was really, really good, a guy called Michael Rowe,
yes,
R-O-E. And I don't think he was given a fair sort of shake of the stick, really. I think he had something a bit special going for him. And had he been given the right opportunity and so on, so I think he could have gone all the way. Definitely, I think he definitely had a bit of special talent about him. Yeah.
I think that's lovely to hear. Someone who perhaps people may not know about and can go and do a bit of a search on. So yeah. I remember Kenny spoke very, very highly of him. He was a bit wild when he was. It was quite wild on the circuit, but it was wild off the circuit. I remember once at 78 at Alton Park, a whole load of us went down to Tarpley after we'd finished for the day and to go down to the main pub in the middle of, I can't remember the name of it now. Stuart will tell us later, no doubt. And there was 15 of us went down there, and there was 13 or 12 different nationalities. I mean, it was unbelievable. But on the way there, Michael was in a car. I was in a car behind him. And he wanted to prove a point that he was quick everywhere. So he kept taking to the grass as we were driving to Tarpley, going the other side of lampposts and all that. But it was a bit nuts. But he definitely had a bit of talent. Yeah. I'd say Michael Rowe. Yeah, I think that shows some ability if he's doing that. Absolutely, excellent.
Yeah, I'm not recommending it, by the way. It's just
no, it's a good story, but don't make your own story like that.
Keep away from that one, children.
Yes, absolutely. We just had a nice line from Paul Linfoot saying it was a great interview. So thank you very much. Very quickly, Chaos Cole. She said she's from Ireland. Have you ever raced over there?
No, I haven't. No, sadly.
No. That sounds like a trip. No, great stuff. Right, probably the best place to wrap up. I think we've got through everything, folks. Thank you, everyone, for your comments and your questions and interactions. And
some great interaction there. It was fabulous.
Yeah, and the past drivers coming on as well. Thank you, Carl and Sean. Not Sean, Carl and Jerry. Absolutely brilliant to see you guys. Thank you, everyone, for your support. As I mentioned, we're back on Sunday night with Greg Murphy, and we have another big thing. Coming up.
One last thing to say.
Yes.
I couldn't have done anything that I've done in racing if I hadn't had the most fantastic family behind me. So first of all, my mum and dad, and then my wife, Karen. So want to mention her.
Yeah,
So,
huge thumbs up to all the family members and friends that help people go
help us
racing.
all do what we want to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Everyone needs a bit of support. Great stuff. So yes, thank you everyone. Really appreciate it. And of course, to you, Sean, the biggest thanks for sparing your time. It's been absolutely brilliant speaking with you. Really appreciate you doing this.
No, it's been great fun. Thanks ever so much for having me on. It's been good having the opportunity to remember all this old shit, to be quite honest. So it's good. Thank you.
It is fantastic because we need these stories to be told so they're kept alive, so people know how racing used to be and how it is, and yeah, best way to do it.
Okay.
Great stuff. Thank you very much, everyone. And we'll see you very, very soon.
Okay.
Good night, all.